You. East Hampton Town Board, we are live, being streamed and recording. Phone lines are up.
Thank you, LTV. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the East Hampton Town Board work session of Tuesday, September 10th, 2024. Cheryl, if you could please read the roll call.
Yes. Councilmember Flood?
Present.
Councilmember Lees?
Present.
Councilmember Rogers?
Present.
Councilmember Calder-Piedmont?
Present.
Supervisor Burke-Gonzalez?
Present. If we could all stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. So today's agenda, we start with a public portion, and we ask you to kindly keep your comments to 3 minutes because we anticipate a large number of folks participating today and calling in. Our topics are the criteria for lowering speed limits on select roadways with myself and Chief Sarlo, draft zoning code amendments with Kate Rogers, Tyler Borsak, and Charlie Collins. And then Rob Connolly will be presenting a draft ethics code amendment. That'll be followed by liaison reports and resolutions. So we do have a sign-up sheet, but for those who haven't had a chance to sign up, we'll also ask for a call of hands. So the first up is Ruth Feinberg. Right here. Welcome, Ruth.
Thank you. I apologize if I'm feeling or seeming a bit edgy because I am a little bit edgy. I came for something a little bit more personal, I think, than most people come for. I have been in touch with Kate Rogers over time. I have been in touch with the town attorney. I also had the pleasure of dealing with Joe Palermo in another context. I live at 6 North Cape Lane, which is in the Northwest Woods. Next door to me is 8 North Cape Lane. I have been here before. I came to talk about this property. It's an abandoned property. We moved into our house in April of 2020. At that time, it was deep into COVID, and the house was sort of nothing. There was a dumpster in the front, it was overgrown, there was a for sale sign out front, and it was an unfinished property. Okay. Flash forward to April 2021, it is exactly the same, but it's a little more overgrown, maybe one visitor every couple months, still a for sale sign. Shortly after that, the for sale sign comes down. Nobody tends to this property. I'm dealing with the town now because I feel I've waited an appropriate amount of time after COVID so that we can address that there is a dumpster in the front of the house. It is overgrown. There are hazards on the property. So it's not just unsightly, it's unsafe. The code people start coming back and forth, back and forth. Somehow I got in touch with Kate Rogers. I think you'll remember. I was just looking back in my emails to see when we started talking about this. And it was actually in 2022. So it's been going on a long time. Recently, they, in June, put up, the code people came and put up some red construction paper that had been laminated that said the property was unsafe, essentially condemning the property and that nobody should be on the property, whatever, but still no action. So we take 1 step forward and 2 steps back. Dumpster still in the driveway, overgrown property, holes in the front, holes in the back, ditches in the back. It's been deemed an actual hazard. If a child was to wander from my property into that property, could easily fall into a ditch. Recently, our newest, greatest development is someone sleeps in his car on the property. So now I'm dealing with not just a hazardous, abandoned property. I'm dealing with a squatting situation, a potential actual squatting situation. I'm done. I need help. We live in a town with a lot of rules. We live in a town with a lot of help. I need help. Somebody has to address this for me. I was told a long time ago that perhaps they could gate the property. I have a tax bill, I have an LLC. Everyone's saying, I can't find him, I can't find him, I can't find him. Well, neither can I. But right now, it's been over 4 years. We're in the same place that we were 4 years ago. And I need somebody to help me. I need somebody to address this. It's East Hampton. There has to be a way for somebody to say, oh, I know what to do. So tell me what I should do. I've been to the meeting before. Just so we're clear, I have been to the meeting before, and I have been encouraged that this would move forward, still in the same place.
Okay, Ruth, so we hear you. This is public comment, so we're taking your comment. We have your phone number. You came into my office this morning. Your message was emailed to all of our public safety folks, as well as the town attorney and the assistant town attorney. We can't give you an answer here, and we will reach out to you this afternoon.
Okay, I just feel like the can has been kicked several times, and I'd like it if somebody could address this with me. Thank you.
All right, what I should have said earlier is that, I know what I've done in the past for the draft zoning code amendment discussion is that I've taken public comment after the presentation, so we can do that. So you have that option. You could speak now or you could speak after the presentation. So next signed up is Denise Savares.
I'm going to do just that. I'm going to speak after the presentation.
Okay, then I have Jess Frost. Welcome, Jess.
Jess Frost, Springs resident for over 50 years. I'm just here to reiterate again my support of the zoning code amendment, proposed zoning code amendments, my gratitude for the working group, and just to make clear how impressed I am with this community and how they've risen to the occasion in terms of what's happening to our community overdevelopment. And I want to thank everybody here for being in support of that. And I hope you guys will make the decision, a good decision, because there are a lot of people out here rooting for this. Thanks.
Thank you, Jess. Next up is Lou Cortese.
Hello. I want to speak today on the topic of the zoning code changes being contemplated by the board. I'm not here to suggest what those changes should be. You as board members know better than I do what they should be. You know very well that the GFA formula should be recalibrated along with some ancillary amendments pertaining to basements and garages. I'm not here to inform you why these changes are necessary, vital to the preservation of the essence of our beloved bucolic small patch of earth. If you love living here, as all of us do, no one needs to explain to you why we want to keep this place unsullied by ever-expansive, conspicuous urbanism. You've heard the reasons why loud and clear and universally. I also don't need to school you on terms like urban density, lot intensity, and the most important one of all, carrying capacity. These environmentally degrading conditions have been the subjects of clarion calls for decades. Those alarms have reverberated from many critical studies like the Comprehensive Plan, the Hamlet studies, the LWRP, CARP, and many other well-researched sources. Indeed, the what, the why, and the calls to action reality checks have been hashed, rehashed, and validated many times over. There is no doubt, no equivocation, no ambivalence as to the proper course of action. It's now high time to take care of business. And that's why I'm here, to urge you, to beseech you, to implore you to act. The Zoning Code Work Group has been working hard, deliberating for almost 2 years. From what I've heard Kate mention in her public reports on the group's work product thus far, the group seems to have produced a core set of changes that go to the heart of the problem. A reduction of GFA by amending the overall formula, the inclusion of some portions of basements and garages, no basement space extending past the house footprint, and reduction of maximum house size. This is a great start. Please, let's not get bogged down. Please move the process quickly and get the changes implemented. The worst thing that I'm afraid of happening now is paralysis by analysis. I have faith in you all that you won't let that happen. Finally, I want to extend a special thank you to Kate. You've done a fantastic job leading the zoning code work group. I know it's not an easy task. Thanks for your persistence and thank you all board members for your consideration of this fundamentally important matter. Thank you.
Thank you, Lynn.
Jane Miring.
I want to speak in this. Can you drop me down later in this part of the public portion? Thank you.
John Wheelen.
Sure, I'll speak now. Thank you.
I don't know who's that drink though. It's kind of annoying.
Good morning, board members. John Wheelen. I'm speaking as a citizen of this wonderful town and also as a member of the zoning amendment work group. And I was born and raised in East Hampton and spent my life here. Besides going away to college and graduate school, I've lived here every single year. It's not a bad place to live. I've been passionate about zoning all my life and was fortunate to work as a planner for a short time and to represent East Hampton Town on the Suffolk County Planning Commission for 2 years, and then to chair the Zoning Board of Appeals for 7.5 years. I had the pleasure of working with Deputy Supervisor Rogers and Board Member Lease on that board. And it was a privilege when Kate Rogers, Councilwoman Rogers, asked me to be a part of the zoning amendment work group. And I want to start by giving her appreciation. Kate has done an incredible job chairing this, and Supervisor, we appreciate all that you've done as well. And I also have to mention the planning department and the attorneys and all of my fellow zoning group members. We've met probably somewhere like 45 times, I believe. We are very productive in our meetings. We are all very passionate. I have a career in building and then architecture, so I like to think that I can see both sides of the picture here. And I think our whole group feels the same way. We have so much experience from all the heads of departments that are on the group, and we are always trying to be cognizant of both sides of the argument and the concerns from the builders, the real estate, the town residents who own their houses and their properties. And I just really want to encourage my fellow citizens and the town board to really grab hold of what we're doing here. It's not often, it's not every year that we get a chance to go back and revisit the zoning code. And our town, those of us like myself who have lived here all their lives have certainly seen the incredible changes that have happened over the last 60 plus years. And I don't think anyone in this town, if we fast forward 10 years, will say, shucks, I wish they had allowed the house sizes to be 33% larger. I wish they had let those setbacks stay at 10 feet instead of 20 feet and that sort of thing. It's all that we are doing is for the benefit of the town. It's for the benefit of our community. We are trying to maintain the beautiful character of the neighborhoods that we have here and that we live in. We all know what it used to be like, and now we're getting these massive houses that are coming right up to the property, and there's not even sunlight in some places in your side yards. So I just hope that all the town residents consider this and kind of take a deep dive into it and reading and learning more about it. And again, I thank especially Tyler and the planning department for all the work and the town attorneys, and they will be sharing that later. And I'm right on 3 minutes. There we go. Thank you all.
Thank you, John. Is there anyone else here in the room? Michael?
My name is Michael Hansen. I'm speaking as a citizen of Wainscott only today. I will not take 3 minutes. I am in favor of the 25-mile-an-hour speed limit. I live in Wainscott, and you may not know this, but in Wainscott, south of the highway, from Town Line on Main Street, that goes by the Wainscott School, goes by the chapel, goes by the Babinski Farm. You take a left up Sayers Path for a short bit, up Wainscott Stone Road to the highway. There's not a stop sign. There's not a yield sign. There's not a slow down sign. There is nothing. There are these 20-mile-an-hour yellow signs that are suggestions that are ignored. 25 miles an hour is a good first step. It's going to take a lot of enforcement. Chief Sartlow is going to have a lot on his plate to deal with that. But I want you to be aware of what is happening in Wainscott. That's a back road that folks take, and they take it all year long. It's not just in the summer when traffic is busy. It is year long that people are taking that back road. And now that there's fewer cars, they're driving faster. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. Is there anyone else here that would like to address the board? Rich?
Thank you. I'm speaking on two behalfs. So the first behalf is the East Hampton Litter Action
You
Committee.
could just introduce yourself so that the
Oh,
clerk has
sorry.
it in the minutes, please.
It's Rich Silver.
Thank you.
So first of all, Litter Action Committee is excited to remind everyone that we will be joining the National Cleanup Day on September 21st, 2024 for a townwide single day cleanup. National Cleanup Day established in 2017, and it's the largest single-day cleanup in the nation. It is the nation, and it's over 2 million volunteers that participated last year. This year, again, on September 21st, the Litter Action Committee will be organizing 4 cleanups, one in Montauk, one in East Hampton, Springs, and Wainscott. They will all go from 10 a.m. to noon, except for the East Hampton one, which will start at 9. So for more information, you can go to the town website where there's information on that. But in Montauk, it's going to be at the CCOM office. That's where we're meeting, and that's on 6 South Elmwood. The second reason I'm up here is on behalf of concerned citizens of Montauk, CCOM, and I'll make it very brief. We did speak at the last meeting where zoning was discussed. First of all, CCOM commends the town for what it's already achieved. I think Lou, in his comments, elaborated on all the thanks that are deserved. The second thing, CCOM acknowledges the complexity and the challenges of what's been accomplished and what's ahead. And thirdly, CCM continues to see the urgency of moving forward as soon as possible in light of the rapid pace of development and its negative environmental consequences. Thank you.
Thank you, Rich. Is there anyone else here that would like to address the board? Please. Welcome.
Hello, everyone. My name is Kevin Buns. I recognize a couple people up there and a couple people in the audience. I'm speaking on behalf of myself and a couple of my buddies who may have gotten stage fright. So, despite the logo on my shirt reading Big House, I'm here to voice my support for sensible amendments to the town zoning code, such as reducing the max GFA from 20,000 square feet to 10, as well as updates to the definition of gross floor area and what's included in that. I'm not here to say that the laws should be so strict that homeowners should not be able to renovate their homes, add an accessory apartment, or even put a shed on their property, but they should be strict enough to stop the absolute degradation of our community. What bothers me so much is what the grossly excess development plaguing the East End represents, which is a whole nother speech in itself. The idea that we even need to enforce such laws to curb what would seem to be such ridiculous building standards absolutely baffles me. One of the aspects that made the East End so alluring was that it seemed as though the houses here belonged where they were. They looked as though they had been here for as long as the forts itself. A fusion of nature and development, functional gardens, animal pathways, plenty of canopy, you name it, we had it. What we've seen is the implementation of copy and paste houses that completely disregard clearing laws, zoning code, neighbors, and the habitat around us. Buy a property, tear down the house, clear 100% of the lot, build, repeat, almost unchecked. Not only is overdevelopment running rampant, but the destruction of our bays, harbors, and perhaps most importantly, our water table is happening right before our eyes. Chemical agents from fertilizers, pesticides, herbicides, sewage, and other pollutants are being absorbed into our water table and ingested by me when I pour a glass of water from the tap. This can be directly traced back to the overdevelopment we are witnessing. We're all ingesting it. A Southampton town trustee and someone I work closely with told me, if you massage nature even a little bit, it will bounce back. This is why I have faith in you all. The statement could not be more true. I would also like to add that it would not be a bad idea to give new home buyers a pamphlet on native plants, what they can and cannot do regarding code within their own property, the type of wildlife that exists out here. Make it simple, make them sign it. We have the opportunity to give the East End a much-needed massage. And despite the amount of development that's already happened, we can convince homeowners to cut a corner of that big green lawn and plant a pollinator garden. Reduce the use of pesticides that have polluted Georgica Pond, or maybe even think twice about that massive house on Sammy's Beach being built in sensitive dune area. Everyone just needs to be sensible and to understand that at the rate in which this place is growing, the small nature preserves dotted around our neighborhoods will soon just be a front to create the illusion that there are still remnants of what was East Hampton before it began to turn into a glorified Levittown. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. Jane?
Yeah.
Morning, Biddle Duke. I
Welcome,
think you know
Biddle.
me from Springs. Well, Kevin Buns for town board. I can't really add much to what John said or what Kevin said. I just want to make sure that you know you have a lot of support in this town for the working group's efforts. And I really want to, I hope that you continue, this is just the beginning of an effort to stand against excess. Excess that has brought exactly what Kevin has talked about and what John was talking about. Excess which has polluted our harbors and surface waters. I'm not going to repeat everything because you've heard it all before and you know all of this. It's really time for us in this community to stand against this excess. We've become a cliche, a caricature of excess. Just see how people talk about the Hamptons in the media and in the world. It breaks my heart. Like you, I've loved this place since the moment I knew what love was. This is home. And it just crushes me that we're being abused. So I just wanted to add my voice to encourage the town board to have the courage to keep pushing, to do everything you possibly can. I realize that there's a limit to what we can do. But let's just keep working on this. It's really important. Thank you.
Thank you, Biddle. Jane?
Thank you.
Good morning, Town Board. I'm Jane Miring. I live in Amagansett. Thank you for holding another work session. I'm here to speak about the zoning code proposed changes. Thank you for holding a third work session today. It is so important to bring the community together. A lot to speak about this. When I first started my little journey of advocacy exploration back in 2019, 2020, I'll admit I was triggered. I was triggered when I saw a big house and I was like, oh, it's so big. Oh, that's so ugly. But very quickly, as I observed more broadly and studied more deeply, became more aware of the myriad pressing challenges this town confronts, I realized that what was at stake is not simply aesthetic. The pace and scale of development, how we as a town consider land use, is having profound impacts on the resiliency and sustainability of our community, the obliteration of housing that is in any way economically accessible to the folks who live and work here, the degradation of the natural resources, the water quality, the ecosystems, the wildlife habitats, the vista, the unsustainable, overwhelming use of our town infrastructure, and oh yeah, the traffic. So it's not aesthetic. Making real changes is essential. Making changes is indeed existential for this town and this community. So in that context, I did want to say that I support nearly all, there's only one, but 10 of the 11 proposed changes that you will be discussing today, both in principle and for most of them in full. And I just want to address one of them more specifically. As attached garages continue to grow bigger, as basements have grown bigger, more luxurious, more it adds to the occupancy and intensity and the use of a house. It has become clear that at least some portion of additional living area has to be counted. It's untenable that these structures that are clearly part of habitable living space should be completely exempt when calculating house size and GFA. So all of the proposals that deal with counting some portion of basements, the depth, the width, all of those, that is, I think, a very smart thing to be doing. And lastly, I just want to say, let me also say that the big amounts of free space are indeed a loophole, and addressing these loopholes in a rational way through code adjustments should be supported, I hope, by the community in full and in principle. But just lastly, it's no doubt that closing loopholes is important, but it is not enough to address the destruction and the degradation, the excess, as Biddle called it, the extraction, the degradation to the land, all the things I mentioned, natural resources, quality of life, affordability, and it's all currently facilitated, not intentionally, but by our existing town code. So I look forward to a robust conversation among you. I hope this will get to public hearing. I hope we'll adopt them. And then I beg and implore very swiftly that we as a working group and with your leadership, Kate, that we move forward quickly and start to address a number of the dimensional issues as well. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Jane. Is there anyone else here that would like to address the board? Jason, you had mentioned there were 5 folks on the line.
That number has grown, so I will start off with the first caller and unmute
Great.
them. To all callers on the line, please let us know when I unmute you if you would like to hold your public comment until after the zoning, or whether you would prefer to speak now, and I'll make sure that that's marked. So first caller, 7570, and unmuting now. Hello, caller, can you hear me?
Yes.
All right. Hello, you are on the air.
Yes, thank you. My name is Pablo Sper. I'm a resident of Wainscott, and came today to participate in the public session to offer my support to both the consideration of lowering the speed limits in East Hampton and also to the reform of the code. But I want to talk particularly about the lowering of the speed limit. I understand that you are going to consider lowering the speed limit to 25 miles per hour in certain streets of the town, and in those that I care most, there's Wainscott Main and Wainscott Stone Road, which have over the years experienced a very substantial increase in traffic, and particularly also in speed. I was in the town board a month ago. I'm not going to repeat what I mentioned to you at that time, all the risk that is having and how it's affecting our community quality of life. I believe that the reduction in speed limit to 25 is a very good step forward. It has the potential to reduce both traffic and speed, but by itself it will not do it. As you well know, rules are rules, but you need enforcement. And here's where we have significant trouble in the town concerning availability of manpower to enforce. As a consequence, apart from relying on police efforts, I believe it's time that we start introducing stop signs, pedestrian crossings, and speed bumps so as to manage the flow, reduce traffic, and also particularly reduce the speed. The speed bumps are particularly a very effective way of reducing speed. Speed bumps have been introduced in areas surrounding us. In Sagaponack, there is several of the high traffic streets have now speed bumps every several hundred feet. And in the village as well, for example, in La Florette, they just introduced speed bumps also every 200 feet. In East Hampton town, we don't have, as far as I understand, speed bumps, and my understanding is that the reason we don't have is because of the opposition from the highway department. And in that sense, I believe it will be extremely useful if you could organize a public hearing with the head of the highway department to understand the gentleman's opposition to speed bumps. My understanding is that they are concerned about cost, they are concerned about snow plowing, as well as about issues of cyclist safety. Me, as an avid cyclist, can attest that I have no problem circumventing and driving through the speed bumps that have been placed in Saraponac and in the village. I'm not an engineer, so I cannot attest to the difficulties of snow plowing, but be as it may, I live in Illinois for several years, which have substantial amount of snow, and they have speed bumps, and so that my understanding from talking to our residents in Saraponac and also from conversations we have had at the Wainscott Citizen Advisory Committee, that Saraponac Highway Department has had substantial support from the residents for the
Paolo, we need you to wrap up. Paolo, we need you to wrap up. We've got 8 more callers on the line. You could.
That's all. Thanks so much, and I appreciate all your work, and look forward to more work. Thank you.
Thank you, Paolo.
Okay, I'm muting
Jason.
the next caller ending 7563. You are on the air. Hello.
Good morning. This is Teresa McCoy calling, South Town Aircraft Noise Committee. I am thoroughly enjoying the conversation and the passion by all the speakers today, and many of the comments I can certainly relate to would apply to the airport, because our quality of life here on the North Fork is still being affected by East Hampton Airport. I wish to share with you, the weather is absolutely stunning for the rest of this week, as it was yesterday and this morning. But yesterday morning at 7:28 a.m., seaplane tail number N115P Peter J. Joseph came tearing over my community at 800 feet. The weather was perfect. And the weather was just as well on the South Fork. Today, tail number 501EX at 7:11 a.m. Came through the Mattatuck Laurel area. What happens to us is happening to Southampton, because that's the route that someone has directed these seaplanes to fly. And at this point in time, I'll reach out again. I'm desperately reaching out to the town board. I've called other sources, including East Hampton Airport Manager, with no reply. Please help address this situation. And as we say our Pledge of Allegiance, we look to have justice for all, and that's what we're looking for. Please help the people on the North Fork address the low and aggressive seaplane pilots and that are flying repeatedly over the North Fork in some fashion on beautiful, clear days, even at low altitude. The first seaplane came in, like I said, at about 800 feet, and the one this morning, I believe, came in at around 2,000 or so. But, you know, when you have the windows and doors all open, it can be heard for miles. So greatly would appreciate your information. And just wanted to say that I learned today that there was a National Litter Day for 9/21, and I think that's something that I can share with the folks on the North Fork and hope to be able to participate in. So I appreciate all the passionate discussions by all the previous speakers. And as I say this to you, I'm standing next to my friend's home, and someone bought the home next door for $1 million that's on the water, and it literally was torn down, and a brand new, huge, massive dock was put in, and now I guess the mega mansion's going to go up. So I feel for you all. I feel for you all, and we are in the same growing pains here on the beautiful, stunning North Fork. Thank you very much for your time, and I appreciate it. I appreciate what you do, and I'm very intrigued as to how you plan on moving forward with your zoning information. Thank you very much, and have a spectacular day.
Thank you, Teresa.
All right.
Jason, we'll take the next caller.
All right. And caller ending 4602, you are on the air.
Hi. Excuse me. I have allergies this morning. This is Betsy Patri, and I'd like to speak now as opposed to waiting. Okay?
Proceed.
Okay.
All right. Hi. I said this is Betsy Patri. I'm calling in regarding the new documents posted for today's meeting for the code amendment change. I'm grateful that there are a few big items as well as more minor stations in the 11 listed for code change, all of which, of course, are very important. But I also suggest that while these 11 items continue through the code change process, at the same time we're working on these elephants in that room, that we jumpstart to the most important measure to work on the continued problem of the elephants in our neighborhood. I truly hope that this board and the zoning group will do everything in their power and as quickly as possible to mitigate, reduce, and to change the building size allowances and the clearing codes on more modest-sized lots so as to reduce the overdevelopment of supersized residents looming over our homes in our neighborhoods. Change the codes, the zoning codes, reduce the max allowances, increase the setbacks, and let's finally deal with this elephant of a problem we have been affecting, that's been affecting our sanity, our environment, our water quality, and our quality of life. And for mainly the last 5 years, not only those of us who call this place home and who really care about our neighbors and neighborhoods, but as well as for those who will come after us. Thank you, and please, pass whatever you can today to put it into the works. And let's just keep moving this forward. And I thank everybody who's been instrumental in doing this. Have a good day.
Thank you, Betsy.
Unmuting next caller. Hello, caller ending 9004. You're on the air.
Thank you so much. This is Gloria Frezza, and of course, I'm sitting in the parking lot at Town Hall because I didn't realize we were in Montauk today. But I have to say, there are a lot of things I don't get. And honestly, my husband and I, we bought our house here in East Hampton 20 years ago, and I didn't get it. I didn't get how important this space is. I totally got that it was beautiful green compared to living in the city during the week where we had our careers and in a condo on the 16th floor. I love the green. There's still a lot of green. And coming from somewhere else, there's a lot of green. It's beautiful. And I came to love the beaches and the natural preserves and all the areas that we really treasure. It wasn't until about 5 or 6 years ago that we moved out here full time that I started to get it. This isn't just about the green. This isn't just about our homes, our individual lawns, our individual lives. It's really about the community. And without being involved in the community, you just can't get it. Because that is where the heart of the Hamptons really is. And we're all part of it, even if we're here just weekends. So what I've learned this past few years working with Rewild Long Island and Change Hampton and Perfect Earth Project and a number of other local organizations is how much work is done by local people, and the power of community to come together and to make a difference. So this summer with Rewild Long Island summer program for high school students, we've done more than 1,400 hours of community service just this summer. So I think in addition to the suggestion that was made to give people a pamphlet on how to take care of their own lawns when they move here or live here, or how to be considerate to the birds who are migrating overhead right now and turn off your lights, how can we preserve community? Part of that is absolutely zoning code, and a $20,000 or 20,000 square foot house is not a year-round dwelling. It doesn't need to be a year-round dwelling, but it needs to be home and meaningful to someone rather than another jewel in the crown. So how can we actually bring people together, as I was starting off on this rambling earlier, when we give people information about their lawns and their homes, how can we give them information also about the various organizations in the community that they can plug into to become part of the community rather than, putting up hedgerows? So this is so important. I want to thank Kate, Jameson, Tyler, and the entire work group on the Zoning Code Amendment Committee, and the speakers today have been fabulous. Kevin Buns, you rock. Jane, Rich, Biddle, everyone has just been fabulous. And I'd really like to propose that as organizations, we come together and develop something that can be handed out, disseminated, because we're all like-minded. So Rewild Long Island, Amber Waves, Surfrider, Share the Harvest, East Hampton High School, Longhouse Reserve, Change Hampton, South Fork Sea Farmers, Perfect Earth Project, Concerned Citizens of Montauk, and we've all been working closely with the town board on many projects, and we can come together and we can help build the community that is at the heart of the Hamptons.
Thank you, Gloria.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm muting the next caller. Let me go find them on the line. And hello, caller ending 4123. You are on the air. Hello.
Hi, can you hear me?
Loud and clear.
Okay, good. My name is Carol Steinberg from Springs. Thank you all. I heartily support the proposed changes to the zoning laws. I urge the town board to make them to preserve the character of this place we love and stop the mega mansion suburbia East Hampton could become if you don't act now. As you probably know, I've been concerned for the past few years about huge houses, as we all are, the overclearing of trees. As I previously mentioned, in order to do my small part, I willed my house and acre wooded lot to the Peconic Land Trust with a conservation easement that would prevent demolition unless it was absolutely necessary and any meaningful addition above, say, 200 square feet. But that's not enough. And now the issue is right in my backyard as a huge house in Springs, the historic part of Springs, looms large over my house and garden. I see it from every part of my house. The wonderful scenic vista has been corrupted with a monolith of a house and accessory structures that cover almost the entire lot. And the house is completely out of character of Springs. I live across from the first fire department, where Hedda Stern, who was an abstract expressionist, lived. And almost every venerable tree on the wooded lot was taken down, which, by the way, resulted in a stop work order last week for overclearing. Even if there is a vegetation plan, which has not been required yet as far as I know, nursery plants do not replace the canopy of oak and cedar trees. Two goals of the town's comprehensive plans, as you all know, are to reduce the total build-out of the town and to protect landscapes and scenic vistas from incompatible development. I urge the town board to enact its proposed changes, work with this wonderful committee, and immediately take up provisions to strengthen the clearing rules and seriously enforce them. And I'd like to reiterate what someone previously said: you have the support of the town. I talk about this everywhere I go, at the garage, at the grocery store. Everyone's concerned, and everybody doesn't always come to the town and say so, but they're all concerned. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Carol.
Okay, next caller. Hello, caller ending 0299.
Yes, good morning, Deputy Supervisor Burke Gonzalez and members of the town board. This is Carolyn Logan Gluck calling. I'm chair of the Wainscott CAC, president of the Wainscott Tree Society, and founder, co-secretary of Wainscott Heritage Project. But this morning, I speak on my own behalf to thank you for the two topics that you put on today's agenda: speed limit criteria and the zoning code amendments. I'd like to speak in support of both proposals. It made my heart sing to see two streets in Wainscott at the top of the list: Wainscott Main Street and Wainscott Stone Road, which now function as highways, alternatives to Route 27 for traffic moving east and west. As you know, the Wainscott CAC has asked for speed limits on these roads to be reduced, and I can feel pretty confident that there will be a discussion at the upcoming October 5th meeting regarding the criteria you put forth, and you can, I suspect, expect a letter of support from the Wainscott CAC. However, I caution you that these implementation of lower speed limits are only as good as the enforcement and need to be used with other tools, including stop signs and speed bumps. And I can only echo the comments of my neighbors, Michael Hansen and Pablo Sper. Furthermore, I urge you to consider expanding the three criteria proposed so that streets such as Wainscott Northwest might be considered. There's a lot that's happened in the years since the New York State Senate and Assembly bills were put forth in 2016, 17, 18, 19, and 20, and there's significant increase in traffic in a road such as Wainscott Northwest, and there should be a means to have that put under serious consideration for speed limit reduction. In addition, zoning code amendments. I'm delighted to see this is on this morning's agenda as well, and want to reiterate the support that I gave at the July 12th meeting in terms of closing loopholes, although I still stand for 4 feet separation to groundwater and not 2, and I wouldn't mind to see lower basements from 15 feet to 12. I understand basketball court, if it's indoors, needs to have 15 feet, but isn't basketball more pleasant to play outside in the summertime? So these are, again, as with the traffic situation, only as effective as if they're going to be implemented in conjunction with other measures, especially modifications to the formula, in order to keep the size, mass, and scale of new construction in proper proportion to our historic East Hampton community. So I just want to acknowledge the comments of many who came before me who spoke so eloquently to this issue, and say ditto. I couldn't agree with you more. I was also happy to hear that the topic of the airport and overclearing came up. I have much to say on those topics as well, but my 3 minutes are almost up, so look forward to chatting with you again soon. Thank you for hearing me this morning.
Thank you, Carolyn.
All right, I'm going to unmute the next caller. Hello, caller ending 5615. Are you on the air? Hello?
Yeah, I'm here.
All right, great.
Hello?
Everyone can hear you loud and clear. Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you. I'm Terry Berger. I'm a year-round Montauk resident, and I wasn't planning on calling in here, but I too want to reiterate support for most of the current code changes that are proposed regarding the basements. However, as many previous speakers have said, that the code formulas for GFA, building coverage, total lot coverage, need to be modified again. It was done in 2016, and we can see a mere 8 years later that that didn't go far enough. So I am fully in support of the committee, and I look forward to them, ask that they give more review and research to the changing of the code formulas also, in addition to that. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Terry.
All right, and I'll go to the next caller. Hello, caller ending 6676. You're on the air. Hello.
I'll wait until after the zoning presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Hello, caller ending 6163. You're on the air.
Good morning, Town Board. This is James McMillan from Amagansett. I hope everyone's doing well. I'm happy we're addressing the zoning changes now. I guess it's a little bit overdue. I just want to mention, too, a lot of people have some very good ideas about this, but they're not really even aware that all of this is happening this far along, only because the 11 o'clock in the morning, it's a little tricky to some of us that, work and everything, and I can't believe how many real estate agents I spoke to that aren't aware of what's happening. So I just thought I'd throw that out there. The morning thing is not the best for some of us. Anyway, we did try to address this like 12 or 15 years ago. One of the main concerns way back then was still the same, the inappropriate scale for the community and the density. The West Coast architects that are out here designing now, they're very clever. They're filling every single inch of airspace and ground space that they possibly could within our zoning code. I think if we proceed with any changes, there's a few other things that I don't see being addressed that I just would like to offer a suggestion that you might want to consider. For instance, right now, all the half-acre lots are still treated like a full-acre lot, which isn't really appropriate in streets that have many half-acre lots. When you see what the pyramid law does, you're still smack up against your property line. So one thing I think we need to look at is the pyramid calculations. For instance, I'm not an architect or a mathematician, whatever, but perhaps half-acre lots, when you calculate that 45-degree angle for the pyramid law, perhaps on half-an-acre lots, you should start that calculation at 5 feet each from each side. That would stop that wall after wall after wall of house problem we have. So when you go to 1 acre, perhaps it should be 10 feet each side before you calculate that 45-degree angle. So right now, the pyramid law, regardless of what else you do, it's still not going to work to reduce the mass from the street level and to keep a community character that we all sort of would like to keep. So that's my suggestion, is reducing where you bring in the pyramid law, where you start calculating it. Okay, the other suggestion I wanted to talk about was the basement calculations. I think at this point, after 15 years of corporate America and investors swarming down on the Hamptons and building these monstrous basements, most of us that live here, we never really fenced right to the property line. We kind of know where it is. We never built out a maximum. We never built up to line. We never didn't have a need to maximize our property because that's not really what we did here. But now that the last 15 years of corporate America taking them over, to tell the rest of us, oh, sorry, if you ever want to sell your house, it's going to be devalued because now your basement isn't as valuable as the guy who cleared every single inch of his property. So I really don't think that's a fair way to do it, because there's a lot of people that are very nice kind of people and they've never maximized their property, and they will get hurt by that particular basement calculation. My thinking is that, I remember years ago, we always knew that a half-an-acre lot usually had a 3 or maybe a 4-bedroom house. A bigger lot had more bedrooms, and a lot of that was considered to be because of the septic flow. So my suggestion would be we should try to figure out, with groundwater rising and our water table changing, I think we really need to figure out what a half-an-acre lot can safely absorb from a septic system, regardless of where the bedrooms are. So rather than calculate the basement, I think we should, if we can do a study and figure out what the approved septic flow for half and 1 acre lots are, then perhaps the house can just be limited 4 bedrooms on a half an acre, regardless of where they are. This way, you still have a basement for rec rooms and workrooms, offices, stuff like that. So I'd highly recommend we go with something like that instead. Let's see, what else did I want to throw in there?
Jim,
In 5 or 10 years,
we need you
all of
to,
these things will be in our groundwater.
Pardon me, Jim?
Yes.
Jim, we need you to wrap up. We need you to wrap up.
I'm about to, but everyone else went for a very long time. I'm almost done. I just want to bring to your refresh your memory, too, about the AI systems. People think that's going to be our savior. It's really a false sense of security. They do not filter out all sorts of nanoparticles, forever chemicals, all of these things. So reducing our density is the only thing that's going to protect our groundwater, and that's our basement calculations. So I just wanted to make those suggestions. I wish I had more time to make a few other ones, but thank you very much.
Thank you, Jim. You can always email the board.
Okay,
Jason,
and
the next caller, please.
Next caller is... Hello, caller ending 4619. You're on the air.
Yes, good morning. My name is Esperanza Leon. I'm calling from Wainscott. Clearly, I'm not alone in experiencing grief as I see the place I've known for nearly 5 decades changing before my eyes at a dizzying pace. Conversations inform me the sentiment is shared, but the comments seem to linger in a room, at the bar, in the backyard. Private indignation does not serve the greater good. The time has come to make these comments public, and I'm so happy to hear so many people making these calls in support of the amendments to the zoning code. Yes, the time has come. Many might believe it has passed, but there is still time to act for the benefit of our community and future generations. I am not in favor of freezing time. I do not resist change. It is the kind of change taking place motivated by forces that do not respect the past, the public, or the law, that lacks vision and is driven by private interests and big money. That is the change so many of us oppose. I support changing a zoning code that laid out a very reasonable vision for East Hampton in 1984 and today is outdated. The time is now. It is time to deal effectively and immediately with the numerous challenges and threats to our community's character and sustainability by making amendments to the zoning code that address current loopholes and comply with the town's comprehensive plan. It is time to be visionary and daring, not timid and meek. It is time to make all the necessary changes, including revisions to the GFA formula and clearing limits, and going farther, as some have indicated, with basement and garage calculations. These changes are past due. We are paying for this delinquency already. So many of us are frustrated, hopeless, angry, and, as I said before, grieving, literally grieving. To act now and make these changes is the ethical thing to do. In supporting these changes, the time will come when we understand, you all understand, we were on the right side of history. Thank you.
Thank you, Esperanza. Are there others, Jason?
No other callers are present, and we only have one caller who is on hold until afterwards, but I have a good gut feeling that people are going to chime in afterwards.
Okay, sounds good. Last call in the room. Anybody else want to speak? Okay, so we're going to move over now to our topics. And the first topic we have is the criteria for lowering speed limits on select roadways. Patrick, if you could pull up the presentation. Great, thank you. And the chief is here too to support us in the presentation. So I'll just start. So all across town, we hear from residents regarding the increase in traffic in their neighborhoods. We saw it particularly after COVID with all of the different apps for folks being able to avoid the major intersections or the village or whatnot. And in some instances where appropriate, we've added stop signs. And in Springs, I know after COVID, we reduced the speed limit on 3 Mile Harbor Hog Creek Road to 30 miles an hour. But there is another tool that we could use selectively. And if you could go to the next page, Patrick. So until recently, we could only regulate speed limits on our roads to 30 miles per hour. But in August of 2022, the governor signed legislation that allowed the town board to reduce speed limits to 25 miles per hour. Now that we would need to get the approval of the Department of Transportation, but the first start is for us to develop the criteria, agree to that, with the help of the chief of police, the highway superintendent, Steve Lynch, and if we need our town engineers. And then we will hear from the community also what roads we think, select roads, should get that reduced speed limit, and then we will take that to the Department of Transportation. So the next slide just spells out the enabling legislation that allows us to do this. I think it's next slide. Common sense tells us what lowering speed limits will do. It'll make our roads safer and reduce the severity of crashes. Speeding is the leading cause of vehicle crashes that could injure or kill drivers, passengers, bicyclists, and pedestrians. And having a lower speed limit will give folks more time to react and could reduce the severity of injuries. So then we had a meeting, and it was my colleague David Lease, myself, the chief, and Steve Lynch, and we talked about what would the criteria be, because we need to start there. And we identified 3 criteria. The first one would be something was back in 2016, I guess it was, when Larry Cantwell was supervisor. We had gone to New York State. We'd gone to Fred Thiel, Assemblyman Fred Thiel, and State Senator Ken Laval, and asked if we could reduce certain streets in our community to 25 miles an hour. We all went to our CACs, and we came back with a list of roads that we thought really could benefit from the lower speed limit. Fred and Ken took that to the legislature for 5 years, trying to get us, we identified the roads, trying to get us be able to do that kind of home rule request, and it wasn't something that the legislature would support. So, but some of those roads are roads we need to consider today, because just like in 2016, almost 10 years later, there's still an issue. We also talked about roadways that are multi-jurisdictional, where one part of the road is in the village and the other part is in the town. Villages already have the ability to go to 25 miles per hour. So sometimes when you're driving through East Hampton Village off of Cedar Street, you can see that one part of the road is 25 and one part is 30. So we could, consider those roads. And then lastly, there's the roadways that have substandard paved areas. There's no shoulders, there's drag out of sand onto the road, making them dangerous. There's a lot of pedestrians and bicyclists, and it should be something to consider. So when we look at the roadways that were identified in the New York State Senate and Assembly bills, there were 2 roads in Wainscott. That was Main Street Wainscott and Wainscott Stone Road, which we heard from a number of folks today about. In East Hampton, it was Indian Hill Road, Miller Lane East, and Miller Lane West. And in Amagansett, it was Bluff Road, Mako Lane, Marine Boulevard, Atlantic Avenue, and Indian Wells Highway. So the second criteria that we're proposing is roadways that are multi-jurisdictional. Examples of that would be Gould Street starts in the village, ends in the town, and Further Lane. And then lastly, roadways that have substandard paved areas. And as I said earlier, these are narrow lanes. They have no shoulders, have sand, readily encroaching on the roadways, and or landscaping encroaching on the town right-of-way, and are heavily traveled by pedestrians and cyclists. Examples of those roads could be roads throughout Beach Hampton, Girard Drive, and Louse Point. So, the next step would be I don't know, Chief, if you want to chime in or go. Okay, so the next step would be for the town board members to take this back to their respective CACs. We discussed it briefly at the East Hampton CAC last night, but felt we should wait until after the presentation and heard back from town board members. Like I said, this was something that came about meeting with the chief of police, highway superintendent. We could also pull in the town engineer if needed. So first we need to identify and come to an agreement on what the set of criteria are. Then we could determine which roadways we feel meet that criteria. We would then go to get permission from the New York State Department of Transportation to reduce the speed limit, and then it would require then an amendment to the town code. We would have, town attorney's office would make that, draft that code. We would have to go to public hearing and hear the amendment. So I don't know if town board members have any questions, comments on the proposal.
Chief, are you good? You want to say anything beforehand?
Just to, it's an excellent presentation. It's very clear. There's not a lot to add. A few notes that I've always made throughout this discussion, even going back to 2016, is the main goal of reducing speed limits is to calm traffic in areas that are heavily traveled, where citizens frequently make complaints. We see some increased accidents or risks to pedestrians and cyclists in those areas. Creating better reaction time for drivers, allowing better sight lines for both the drivers and the pedestrians and cyclists, safer entrance and egress from blind driveways, areas where people park along the shoulders and cyclists or cars have to go around those vehicles, where there's no parking signs, but the roadways have been improved into the town right-of-ways, where the roadways were never actually fully paved or cleared to the the envelope that the roadways were actually given in the town in planning. These areas highlight needs for reducing speed limits. We want improved safety conditions, and we feel that most of these areas that have been highlighted so far are the main focus for this effort. On top of that, just to be very clear, we spend an inordinate amount of time monitoring and patrolling these areas. And it is clear that we have a high volume problem in many of these locations. The speed problem is variable. The speed signs that we do put out do not give us data that DOT has deemed problematic and safety of a speed concern. So this is why we've had to take other angles to it. Despite what people walking in neighborhoods or people trying to pull out of a driveway may see or estimate as a speed problem, when we put the signs there for a week or two at a time, where police officers sit with a radar on, the average speeds that come back in general and in a range, really don't fall into this range that is a serious safety concern. So I just want to make that very clear. The sign data, really, we have a very safe community in general. I know it's problematic. I know it's frustrating. However, these measures will help create improved lines of sight, improved safety. They're not going to solve everyone's volume problem. And regardless of how many hours we spend trying to write tickets or sitting in these areas, there's going to be people who speed. There's going to be cars with loud mufflers. There's going to be cars with oversized tires. It's going to sound and look like, we haven't fixed all the problems. We're never going to fix all the problems. The idea is to make it better and keep improving things for the community. So that's my 2 cents on this.
Thank you, Chief.
So I think one thing to talk to here is that everyone's going to want one on their street, right? I want people on my street to go 25. The challenge is that if all the town roads went to 25, would people adhere to it? We all drive on the LIE, and if one person puts up their hand here and tells me they go 55 on the LIE, we'll have discussions, right? So it's not about the number on a sign. It's partially about enforcement. So how do we enforce this? I think the chief has given us some good indication on that. There are other methods too. There's engineering methods, roundabouts, increased stop signs, etc. Road engineering, kind of zigzaggy. They have capital costs and they're hard to deliver. And as we've seen elsewhere, there are concerns within the community as to the environmental impacts of some of those, the character of the neighborhood. There's speed cameras. They work in other countries, but they've been tried on Long Island and shut down because no one really wants to take responsibility for owning a speed camera program, but they do work. I don't like them myself, but whenever I see one, I do slow down. So the enforcement piece is a key part of this challenge wherever we put them. For me, I think there's two pieces of guidance, one of which I think we're picking up here with regards to the accident spots. I think that's key. The other guidance I would go with is around schools. I mean, we have 20-mile-an-hour zones around schools, and that's based on, it's a triage formula, basically, years of life. So whenever you come across a scene with multiple victims, you use the years of life approach to say the youngest victims typically have the longest to live, so we treat them first. And so that's the other area where I would potentially like to expand this would be around recreation areas. I think it would be smart to increase those areas because we have concentrations of young people there. I think the tributaries around school areas, I mean, we have the 20-mile-an-hour zone in front of schools, but you have kids cycling, you have kids walking, skateboarding, after school. Some of those major avenues, I think it would be wise to kind of put the 25-mile-an-hour zone in those areas as well. Other than that, I am broadly supportive of this. I think it's something we need. I think, one of the things you learn about with accidents is that speed is the major determinant in an injury. It's E equals mv squared. Anything you're squaring, the velocity you're squaring, that's what's going to determine about how badly you get hurt. So thinking about, who are the citizens we need to protect the most? Any recreational facilities, I think, the area where we're looking at putting the new senior center, there will be people who decide to walk there. I think that's another area that maybe they're harder of hearing. So having adequate speed limits in and around other areas, I think would be helpful as well.
Thank you, Tom.
So I completely agree with Tom. I know this has been discussed before. Areas where there's concentrations of individuals, I think is important to potentially put on for criteria. I know Kathy, Chief, and I have discussed this in the past. I think these are all places of mass gathering or places of gathering, general assembly. You might want to look at places of worship also on there, or even historical neighborhoods then too. Those might be locations in which might have weight in criteria also. But with what Tom said about schools, very similar to what I said last night at the Montauk CAC, school is in session, everyone should slow down, and the tributaries to school could hold some type of weight also to get supervisor.
Thank you, David. Kate?
Yes, I support all of the recommendations in the process. When we talk about it, I understand what the chief says. There are certain issues in the community that we can do things about and proactively can do things about, reactively can do things about. There are certain issues that have been in our world, in our vernacular, since I was a child, which was a million years ago. And I now understand in my lifetime, they'll never go away. People will never stop attempting to go faster than the speed limit, and people will never stop littering. So that doesn't mean, however, that we can't improve conditions in the town. We can't take away some of the impacts of speeding. And I think this is a really good first start since the state has passed this legislation allowing the towns to drop the speed limit. I also think if you're doing 35 and a 30, it's a different ticket, a different insurance issue. Or if you're going 40 and a 30, let's say, it's a different impact on your insurance than if you're going 40 and a 25. So I think that it has meaningful consequences for breaking the speed limit, which will, of course, help with deterrence. The Wainscott Citizens Advisory Committee are, of course, wholly in favor of the criteria, and did mention one more criteria, and that would be streets that have very difficult sight issues. The one that I'm always using, and this isn't a street that they say, but it's one I drive frequently, is like Old Stone Highway. You can't really, there's so many curves in the road that and it's used with bicyclists and children that it's very hard to know when you can kind of give them more room to move over someone to the next lane, because you really can't see around the turn or upper hill. So that was just another criteria that they had suggested. But I'm fully support, and I'd like to see us in another phase also look at all the criteria that my fellow board members have mentioned. Great.
Yeah, I agree with what's been said. I was going to say what Kate said, which is, considering where sight lines are limited or visibility is limited. Obviously, we have to set up these criteria so it's not arbitrary when we do request this. But it seems like, as Tom said, everybody's going to want their street to be 25. But I do think it's important that we allow for, real safety concerns where it's very hilly, very curvy, or otherwise, dangerous to travel fast. So I don't know exactly how to word that, but I share Kate's concern.
Great, thanks. So we'll go back, and make some changes, because we'd really like to get this implemented this year, or at least go to the DOT this year. Assemblyman Fred Thiel is in office until 12/31/2024, and he's got great connections with the Department of Transportation, so I'd like to do it while he's still in office.
I appreciate the support. Obviously we deal a lot with complaints from the community, and we expend a lot of resources and time in these areas that are on the list. I ask that you guys, as you move forward in making these determinations, sort of do it in stages. Yeah. So as Tom is saying, we don't just flood everybody with turning the town into a 25-mile-an-hour zone town. That is not the norm across the state. We have many areas of the town that are county roads, state roads. We don't have any real say other than a request to regulate those. We want to be very cautious about having a 40 or 45-mile-an-hour zone intersecting with a 25, and understand traffic flow and the use by commercial vehicles, residents commuting, things like that, and try to encourage people to flood more onto the main roads and use those main arteries, and not make every other side road be a 25. I just think we have to be a little cautious with that. And I appreciate your support in this.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chief.
Yep.
Okay. So next up, we have the draft zoning code amendments. Kate, you wanted to do an introduction?
Yes, I'm going to make a statement and frame the conversation. First, I want to acknowledge the members of the zoning code work group that are in the room: Jane Miring, John Wheelen, Denise Savarese, Joe Palermo, Tyler Borsak, and Charlie Collins. Jameson McWilliams, who had a very sharp hand in working with Charlie on these codes, is unable to be here today, but I do want to acknowledge all the work that she's put in to this. So I'm going to start with reading an advertisement that I just saw. Location, location, imagination. The listing you've been waiting for. Renovate your affordable dream home in the dunes of Amagansett. Nearly grade lower level floor makes this potentially a 3-story home by increasing septic and egress to get additional bedrooms to max out the available square footage. This is a 0.25 acre property. The house is listing at $3.5 million, that affordable chance, and it's currently a 1,600 square foot house. So is this false advertising for the current construction allowable in the town of East Hampton under current zoning? It is not. Recently, I was reminded, and I think Jim McMillan brought it up, of past efforts of prior boards to address development that is increasingly not in compliance with the comp plan. Council member Sylvia Overby sought to reduce house size in response to large-scale development in the lanes decades ago. And at the time, it was said, well, this is just in the lanes. It's not going to happen town-wide. This effort was not supported by the majority of the community. It was just an issue in the lanes. I nod to Sylvia as she saw the future so clearly. This was over decades ago. I have great gratitude to the Cantwell administration. Kathy, you were a part of that administration, for successfully reducing the dimensional formula of the town zoning codes at the time, as this exceptional, and I mean exceptional to the comprehensive plan, development took place, and also removing other exemptions in the code. I have never heard in all the time since these changes were made anyone saying we have to go back and remove them. They've been a disaster. So I want to give comfort to people that may be cautious about what we're doing. However, as we know, exceptions to the dimensional formula and to the town codes are now being exploited to the maximum extent. And, we've named them loopholes, but I think that kind of almost diminishes what's happening. There are exemptions to the town code. These homes are being priced by the entire square footage of the home. The prices include the finished lower levels, things we call basements. They include all of the garages. They're priced by the square foot. So there is not one area of the house that is not being considered when you're pricing it out in the community, which is causing homes on half acres to be 7 million, 5 million, 3 million plus. It endlessly goes up as the square footage increases. The lower levels, are the basements that we talk about, and the basements as I grew up you threw a rec room down there if your kids wanted to have a place to play and you wanted to kind of get them out of the one den in the house where you could have maybe read a book. So the kids went downstairs. My washing machine and my dryer, I have an unfinished basement. My washing machine and my dryer, they always put them in the basement to reduce the risk of damage to the home and flooding. Then the basements were mechanical areas and they were storage. Occasionally, and this is also important and something we don't want to stop, is multi-generational living in a home. Maybe another family member moved into the home, a grandmother, a grandfather, aunt, uncle, whatever, and there could be a place for them to have a little separate place for some privacy on their own. These are not the issues that we're looking to address. The lower level finishes now include bowling alleys, wine cellars, tasting rooms, bedrooms and bathrooms, spas, increasing mass, excavating essential soils to allow this to fit under our code, increasing consumption of materials, increasing traffic and waste. However, we are not saying don't do this. This is not the intentions of these amendments. What we are saying is it's time to count some of these improvements, a portion of the improvements, to offset, once again, the space that you can have above ground to build these things, since the space below ground is not counted or seen whatsoever. This water, we know that the lower level foundations, we are saying count these to a certain percentage and reduce the impacts of the structures that now sit in our groundwater. Lower level foundations built that far outsize the first floor footprint of the rest of the house as far as they can go. We call them iceberg houses. That water that's excavated, that soil that's excavated and the water that is absorbed by those soils, it has to go somewhere. It's not going away. We are bound to address these issues. We, as a town board, must comply with the comprehensive plan. We need to restore the balance of development opportunities, as it is now a scarcer property in our town that sells below $1 million. And the more 3,000 plus square foot houses that are built on 0.25 acres completely ignore housing affordability. Another plan that's been adopted into our comprehensive plan. Again, I ask, is this who we are? We have heard from community members. We have gathered, the committee, industry folks, and listened to their comments and made changes accordingly. We do not want to hurt a person with a small house on a lot that wants to have that generational family living or rec room for the kids. So we carefully chose changes to our codes that address the non-compliance with the many plans that now make up our comprehensive plan. Every one of those plans, from the comprehensive plan update itself, through the Hamlet studies, through CARP, through the climate action plan, and the affordable housing plans, are now part of our comprehensive plan. All of these plans were studied and developed with community input. Many industry folks sat at the tables, were adopted through public hearings, passed SHECRA, and were adopted by were approved by the Suffolk Planning Commission in one way or another, and the state. It is now time to make reasonable changes we need to bring development of our neighborhoods back into harmony with the community that has clearly stated what they want time and time again through these adopted plans. What makes East Hampton, East Hampton? We are on the board, we are mandated to preserve the character, the environment, and the community of this place. Today, we will hear from members of the committee who have volunteered endless hours to make these changes. We have the chief building inspector, years of experience in the field, the director of code enforcement, years of experience in the field. Senior planner Tyler Borsak, who has probably evaluated in one way or another every property that's in this town through his work as a planner in the past 14 years, working for the Zoning Board of Appeals, analyzing every application that comes in front of the board. I wonder what the number is, Tyler. A past ZBA chair, John Wheelen, who was also a planner and is a member of the building committee. We have two sitting ZBA members on our committee. I know people know Jane well. I'll just speak to Denise's experience before being on the zoning board and vice chair of the zoning board. She was the secretary to the zoning board of appeals. She also saw every single application, determination, memo from every town, every town board, town staff, and also members of the community, representatives of the applicants. They had to pass through her desk. She has years of zoning experience. The attorneys, our town attorneys, met with members of the building community, particularly surveyors, to consult on the draft codes. Jameson McWilliams, a zoning board attorney who worked on this and also worked in the past in the private sector in land use. Charlie Collins, a recent addition to the town attorney's office, but by no means new to East Hampton, and zoning codes from his work in the private sector, is also contributed greatly to these written draft codes. However, as we now know, the past well-intentioned exceptions to the codes that were put in place in the 80s are now being exploited to the maximum extent. The zoning code work group respectfully asked the town board to consider taking these recommendations to public hearing. The committee has much work to still do. We need to have a community-wide, robust discussion about the dimensional formula that exists now, about setbacks which influence clearing, about the codes that protect our wetlands, bluff crests, bluffs, and our most essential fragile ecosystems. Because in 9 years on the ZBA, I heard too many times, after all, it's only a natural resources special permit. Our code is a living document, and now it needs to be amended to support its intent and its purpose. With that, I'd like to introduce Charlie and Tyler and Joe. I don't know what order you're going to speak, to walk us through the presentation, if we can get it up on the screen. You want to speak? After.
All right. Well, thank you, Kate, for that introduction. Pretty laid out pretty well for everybody already. I think we can go to the next slide. It's just a list of all the members, and many of the members are here as described. Go to the next slide, please. And this is the support staff. That's all, not all here today, but all been working on this. And yeah, so the goal of all this has been described by Kate much more eloquently than this small sentence, but it's to bring the code into compliance with the comprehensive plan of the town. So this is our third work session about this. Starting, first one was, I believe, in May, then July, then now. So we'll go through this quick. It's updates the definitions of basements, finished and unfinished basements, limits to the depth of basements and not extending basements beyond the exterior of the first floor. That's the iceberg basement. Updates the definitions to include attached garages as part of the principal structure and include in the gross floor area calculations under certain circumstances. Updates the definition of GFA to include portions of attached garage and portions of finished basements. Increase separation for accessory structures from the principal structure from 5 feet to 10 feet. Add new limitations on the maximum height of accessory structures. Reduce the maximum GFA for a house from 20,000 square feet to 10,000 square feet. Measure overall height to the top of any railing, regardless of material. This was a loophole that was known in the zoning world as the glass wall loophole, glass railing loophole. Measure overall height, establish a 2-foot separation to groundwater for all buildings and pools, and increase railing height for certain roof decks to 42 inches from 36 inches. And finally, requiring 2-foot topography on surveys at the building inspector's discretion. The next slide. So on this is this here is the definition. Oh, just for clarity for everyone, if you're unsure, so this is the existing code that has been amended. So if you see the strike through, that means it's currently in the code that would be removed, and the things that are underlined would be added. So it's not a full reworking of the code; it's addition and subtraction.
So Charlie, first, so just for clarity for everyone, we're working in 255, which is the zoning chapter of the town code, and this is section 120. Which is
the definition section. So this is the gross floor area definition. This has been a point of contention, and it just was confusing to a lot of
practitioners, and because there was a kind of a, there's accessory structures and principal structures were calculated differently, and this is more of a clarification of that and a simplification and making it more uniform, so everyone knows where we're coming from. So this would make it a principal building and an accessory building or GFA are calculated the same way. And then also some minor, we took out cellars because we're going to be discussing that later about adding portions of finished basements into a GFA. And then we added it was really just more of a clarification of the way it was calculated or the way it was described, not really in the sizes or anything like that. On the next slide, this is a continuation of the same GFA definition. This is again pretty much the same, except now we're adding this, and D is now discussing garages and including a portion of the garage over 600 square feet in the GFA. So previously an attached garage was not included in GFA, and no matter how big it was. Now we're saying this code would say 600 square feet is free. After that, it counts towards your GFA. And then with basements, it would be anything in your finished basement, the first 600 finished area of your basement, that we're going to get to the definitions of that later, would count towards your GFA. But anything the first 600 would be free. Anything over that would count, 50% of that would count towards your GFA. So for an example, 1,000 square feet of finished space, the first 600 is free. The next 400 you divide in half. 200 square feet would go towards your GFA. Next. So
and also, just to go back to C, this is where we make the change on the accessory structures. From 5 feet to 10 feet.
Yes.
And also from another accessory structure, and Joe's going to speak to that in a bit.
Yes. In the next slide, so this is where we talk about basements. In the previous, it seems over the years the definition or the term was cellar, then it was basement. The code kind of flip-flops back and forth. So we've decided that we're going to use the word basement now to describe basements. That's more common, I think, in just terminology now. So this is just changing that from cellar to basement. And then any portion of a basement. So the problem would be that we're describing a basement differently because there's situations where basements are coming out of the ground more. Basically, if you're out of the ground, you're no longer a basement. So if you start digging out the basement, it becomes not a basement anymore. So that's part of that's where try to redefine what a basement is to account for the situations like Kate described earlier. Basement finish. This is a new addition to the code. There's never been a term for this. But this would be any portion of the basement which is improved upon beyond the raw and unfinished foundational construction materials, heated enclosed areas embodying walls, floors, and ceilings which are built so as to be used in a manner similar to other finished spaces within the building or structure above shall be considered finished and are therefore habitable. Mechanical spaces shall be excluded regardless of finishes. So this would be, again, it's difficult to encompass every possible permutation of a basement in a code, but this is the way we're writing it, and we talk to the building inspector. You can go into a basement and understand, like, if you were in this room, which is kind of in a basement, this would be a finished basement, versus if you go into that room and it's a mechanical room, it probably would not. You wouldn't consider it a finished space. And then unfinished, any portion of the basement which is built with only the raw and unfinished foundational construction materials or designed and used for mechanical space shall be considered unfinished and is not habitable. So those areas would not count in your calculation to GFA.
So let's just back that up a second for folks like me. So what we're talking about now, including in the gross floor area calculation of a house, so that is important because we have max gross floor areas now. Right now, nothing below ground is counted towards those max GFAs. And as I said, we're we wanted to make sure we balanced between a small lot and a small house use of all their available space, which has a de minimis impact on the environment, the community, traffic, et cetera, all the things we're talking about. So we wanted to make that every finished portion of a basement, we're still not counting the unfinished portions. So if you have storage, if you have mechanical spaces, they're not part of the calculation. Instead, if you have a finished basement by this definition, the first 600 square foot, as Charlie said, is exempt from being included in your gross floor area. And then after that, 50% of that finished space is now included in the gross floor area. So that's the balance between the basements that are 2,000 and 4,000 square foot of, finished space and calculated as part of the selling price versus a small house on a small lot, and you want to have a rec room for your kids.
Okay. Next slide. So this top one is again, there's a section in the code. Basically, cellar and basement has been used interchangeably. This is just flipping it to basically, if someone goes to cellar, it sends them to basement. So there's no confusion. In the next line where it's 255.1167A, this is really just a housekeeping. When we're going through this, we were searching for the word cellar, and we found this section of code that said no bedroom shall be located in any garage or cellar. This was put in the code, and it was determined that is not it. It goes against New York State Building Code, so it is not enforceable. So they're just really just cleaning up the code to reflect what the law is.
So that's another change that happened to our community. In the past, we were able to not have bedrooms in a basement, but we have to be in. That was found to be in non-compliance with New York State Code, so we had to change that, and that's why we're seeing 4 bedrooms, 3 bathrooms just in the lower level space.
And then the next section on this page is from 255.1174, which deals with other setbacks and height and depth restrictions. So there's a long list in this section of code, but this is only the pertinent stuff that we're changing here today, or we're proposing to change today. Basements, so we're adding this line basements. And basements shall not exceed 15 feet in vertical distance measured from the top of the foundational slab to the lowest horizontal structural member of the floor system above. So basically, you can have a 15-foot high ceiling in a basement. The 15-foot came from an upstairs, and you can have anything over 15 feet counts as 2 stories. So to kind of mimic and have some symmetry between the codes, that's where we came up with 15 feet there. And then so then this next section talks about the basement egress. And if you have by code, you have to have egress, but Joe and Tyler can talk about this too, but there's been a lot of expansion of egress to the point of it's becoming it's no longer an egress, it's a full wall. It's not just an egress well window, it's a 50-foot long by 30 feet, it's a big excavated area. So this section of the code you obviously would be allowed to have egress for any window that you need to have the proper egress for, but there would be a limit on the amount of total egress area outside of the windows in the basement. So that would be the 300 square feet.
And also, and that
10
is the
feet.
Footprint of the basement not exceeding the first floor.
Yes, yeah.
First story of the building, as we're seeing, which becomes kind of a greatly expansion of space, because now if you think of your house and usually your basement's straight under your first floor and you can walk around your house and that's all it is, but now we're seeing basements and sub basements, and Joe and Kevin can speak to that, that extend well outside of the first floor footprint, the normal foundation of your home. And also in speaking to the folks from the industry, this leads to cracking. It's not the best type of development. Cracking and leaking in your basement leads to mold and constant repairs. So the basements that we're seeing that are almost property line to property line underground, this is the issue that we wanted to deal with in this code.
Yeah, and the egress would be, the 300 square feet would be cumulative for the entire property, not just it wouldn't be per window or egress, it would be a total number for the whole whole structure. Next would be another definition, which we are the height of a structure or a building. So this is where we've had some consulting with surveyors and architects, because it's a very difficult situation to determine what natural grade is on a property, because natural grade is easy if the property's never been developed, but once someone's dug a hole and built a house, it becomes very hard to understand where, and I'll let Joe talk about this too, if you have any questions on that, but it's hard for the building inspectors and the planning department to really get a idea of where like if people have altered the grade to benefit themselves.
So let me just go on that too. So how do you get the 50-foot long out 3-story structure now? Because now your basement is full, an entire side of your basement is fully dug out, which is what we're seeing. And in past presentations, we showed the visuals of this. So you have the complete egress, walls that actually completely open up floor area, and the way to achieve that and get it and not have it count as a story under our current town code is to excavate down, not go up, but excavate down and completely change the grade of a property, and that's what we're seeing. So in our code definition now, it's natural grade is a measurement that's taken prior to any construction. And that's what we say where your grade starts on your property. However, because we don't have any limitations on what you can excavate of those soils, we are attempting to address that. You can see in advertisements going around neighborhoods 3 literal stories outside of the ground. And how can that happen? And it's because of the way we're measuring height and the definitions for natural grade and story.
Yeah, so we would change the way that's measured, so the vertical distance measured from natural grade, if you can determine that easily, or lowest adjacent exterior grade to the highest point of the finished roof or roof railing system, regardless of material, whichever is greater. So this was to get rid of that. The regardless of material is referencing the glass handrail. For years, that has been determined that it didn't count towards your pyramid, but now it would count. And if you are going to dig out, like Kate described, these big walkouts, now your height, you got to take height from your big dig out, not natural grade because you excavated it so much. A story, we just added just to kind of tie things in together, because once you start changing code, you realize that there's another section and then another section and then another section. They need to be conformed so that it all works together and plays nicely together. So we added a story, so anything that comes out of natural grade 4 feet, if you're only 2 or 3 or under 4 feet, you're underground or are not considered a story, you're still a basement, but once you get above 4 feet, it becomes the first floor of the house. So, but this is what Kate was saying, that people are excavating so that they are well exposed over 4 feet, but it's still natural grade. So now we added our lowest adjacent exterior grade. So if it has become excavated, it now counts as a story. So then you wouldn't be able to have a 3-story house. Then the next one is height, determination of height. Again, this is in 1172. This talks about the height that we just discussed. The height of any point of a building or structure shall be the vertical distance from such point to the natural grade or lowest adjacent exterior grade directly beneath the point whose height is being measured, whichever is greater. The height of a building or structure shall be the height of the highest point, and when applicable, the measurement shall be taken from the highest point of any roof railing system, regardless of material. Again, this is the glass wall loophole that we're trying to close up. All right, next. Accessory buildings definitions. So this is just, again, a lot of these sections were sort of kind of just a housekeeping, cleaning things up. But there was also, because of the definition of garage, we had to add this in here because we're going to be counting garages or portion of proposed to count a portion of garages into GFA. So a building or structure which is customarily, and so this is an accessory building or structure, which is a building or structure which is customarily incidental or subordinate to a, and this is, we're just changing it from main to principal, again, for just kind of clarity, building or structure. This term shall not include a private garage attached to a principal building or structure. So if it's attached, it's no longer an accessory building or structure. It's part of the main house. Artist studio, this came up through like going through the code. We noticed that this needed to be cleaned up. So artist studios are allowed to have plumbing, but only sinks. They're not allowed to have other plumbing facilities like showers, toilets, baths, all that. So this is just clarifying that by saying with sinks being the only plumbing facilities allowed within in an artist studio. Garage private. Again, this is just a garage can be an accessory building or a portion of a principal building or structure. So now we're just, garages are being incorporated into the main structure. The next one is pool house. We added this, this was after going through all these sections, it was, the pool house has been something that's been, it's never had a definition in the code, but it's in the code, like it has a definition, but it never was actually defined. So this was just added again for hopefully more clarity and understanding of what actually a pool house is. So then a pool house would be an accessory building or structure customarily incidental to a pool or spa use and which internal plumbing is allowed. A pool house cannot exceed 200 square feet in gross floor area, and porches, roof patios, or other structures attached thereto shall be included in the GFA calculation for such structure. Joe would have a lot more on situations like that he sees with applications.
So Joe, you're going to come up after Charlie and just emphasize these codes?
Sure.
Okay.
And then this is just another kind of clarification for principal building or structure, which is a main building or structure, including any garage attached thereto. So we're just adding things and cleaning up the definitions. And then, so then this next slide is limitations on accessory buildings, which is in 255-1123. So we added this or structure just to, again, for clarity, make sure everybody, if there was any discrepancies there, may include a private detached garage, because we're just distinguishing between detached and attached garages, so we wanted to make that clear. And then added pool house, because now it's a defined term. We wanted to make sure that was in there. And then B, we just added this. It's this section was a little unclear, so we just really wanted to hammer down the fact that a pool house is an accessory structure, but it has a different size limit. A regular accessory structure is 600, but a pool house is 200, and that's just reaffirming that. And then C, this was a clarification, again, about the artist studio, and that it can only have sink or sinks, but no other plumbing facilities. And then the next slide is a continuation of this same section.
So I also want to add to folks in terms of compliance with the comprehensive plan and the affordable housing plan, none of these amendments apply to ADUs or housing affordable structures within a house. They're exempt.
Yeah, this section here is exempting, the affordable accessory apartments. So like an accessory building, aside from an ADU, can't have livable space in it. This is just, that's that saying, and then we're just taking this. This is a lot of this was just housekeeping, clearing stuff up, and then so striking D. E is we're talking about the heights, and this was brought up when we talked to people. So we want to make sure that affordable accessory apartments are not, like the height limits do not apply to this, because we realize if you limit the heights, you might limit the the ability to build a dwelling unit above a garage possibly, or something like that. So this says, except for an affordable accessory apartment permitted pursuant to 255-1163, no accessory building on any residential property shall exceed a maximum height of 15 feet or 20 feet for a gabled roof, or a maximum height of 12 feet or 15 feet for a gabled roof in the case of a pool house. So this limits the heights of accessory structures and the heights of pool houses.
Because right now, accessory structures can be the same size as the
yeah.
primary structure, which is 32 foot for gabled and 25 foot for flat.
Yeah, and then there's depending on the size of the lot.
So that directly also goes to mass and scale, that you can build a primary structure, let's say gabled at 32 foot, then you can have other structures on your property that match that height, even though they're just accessory structures.
So bringing the height of the accessory structures down. And then a private garage attached to a principal building or structure is not an accessory structure and shall be considered a portion of the principal structure. The total square footage of the attached private garage in excess of 600 square feet shall be included in the gross floor area calculation in the principal structure. So if you have an attached garage of 600 square feet, it doesn't count towards your GFA. But if you have a 1,000 square foot attached garage, 400 feet of that attached garage will count towards your GFA calculation.
Is that a one-car garage or two-car garage?
600 two. It's a good sized garage.
And it's also what you're allowed for a detached garage. That's the maximum allowed for attached garage. And we wanted to be careful not to push development of additional structures to get around attached garage codes.
And then the next one is this the same? It's the same. That's a little different. But this is just the limitation on this maximum size on the the largest zoning from a 20,000 square foot house to a 10,000 square foot house maximum. And the next slide is depth to groundwater, which was discussed earlier. Proposed 1174E, depth to groundwater, a minimum of 2 feet of separation from groundwater shall be required for all buildings and pools. Non-leaching structures of a sanitary system are excluded, provided they're properly engineered to withstand buoyancy forces. Basically, you can have a septic, if you have a sanitary system near groundwater, it needs to be able to not have the water pressures push it out of the ground.
But we do want to have separation from the bottom of structures to our groundwater. They sit in groundwater, as you know. There are materials in cement and waterproofing materials that leach out into groundwater.
And I believe it's a common requirement on ZBA applications, so this is kind of bringing that, it's been required a lot for sensitive properties, just town-wide. Minimum railing height, so this would be for any decking attached to a building or structure which is 10 feet or more above the ground elevation directly beneath the decking. The required railing system will be at least 42 inches in height. Next slide is survey requirements. So recently, Joe again can talk about this a little more, but there's been a request for topography, 2-foot topography contour lines to be provided to the building department on applications. And this is just putting that into the code formally. And it also gives the building inspector discretion to require it or not require it, because there is going to be situations where it definitely is needed, but there's also many situations where, and Joe will describe, but not necessary for certain applications. And that was it for this round of our edits from our last 2 work sessions and all the comments that we received from the board, from the public, from the professionals. And I think after doing all this work, it might be time to maybe hear formally what the public has to say, so we can go forward from there. That's all I have.
Thank you, Charlie.
Thank you, Joe. Tyler, who wants to go? Either of you? Joe, why don't you? Joe, why don't you pop up? I can't emphasize what a source of information about what's happening out in the field that Joe, Kevin, and Tyler have been, as this is their absolutely daily life.
It is my life.
Even on the weekends.
Joe Palermo, Chief Building Inspector. Just to back up a little bit, I was on the job a couple of months, and Kate called and invited me to join the zoning committee, and it's been quite an experience. Every Monday morning, 9:30, it's the first thing you're doing for the week. It's a great group, a whole wide range of experience, and we've had a lot of good discussions. A lot of my input came from the real life things I see on a daily basis out in the field when I was a building inspector, climbing ladders and going to basements, and in the office, a lot generated from say complaints or the ongoing, the recurring problems and issues with like height, pyramid, illegal apartments, questions with low levels, and so a lot of that, I put that kind of together and brought that to the committee. So Kate, thanks for inviting me. So just to kind of emphasize a couple things that Charlie said, we finished up with this survey. Once again, when it comes to the question about height, we got a lot of complaints on height, or a lot of calls. Go out and check, so we'll ask for as-built surveys. So we figured how to cut that off would be to ask for, in most cases, or especially a case when there's a vacant lot that was built upon, we asked for a survey with 2-foot contours. We also asked the architect to take those 2-foot contours and actually plot them on the elevation, showing us where the existing grade is, and put the elevation grades at the different points of the building. Just makes it easier for us to, when we're reviewing plans, to check height. Like Charlie mentioned also, doesn't go with everything. It would be to the building inspector's discretion. I mean, if somebody's building a pool or a patio, we're not going to ask them to incur an additional cost for something that's not necessary. So it's only when we deem it really necessary.
So if a property basically is flat, there would be no reason.
Yeah, flat, we're not going to ask, or if it's an existing home and there's a certain, anything that's going to affect height, we'll ask for it, or at least the points. But no, like for patios, pools, things like that, we're not going to ask. I'm just going kind of backwards here. The railing height from the second floor roof decks, railing height from 36 to 42 inches. 42 inches is the commercial standard. Anything above grade 42 inches across the board on railing heights. Personally, I feel a lot more secure with a 42 when you're up on a roof deck and you got a 36-inch, and I'm not a tall guy, but a 36-inch rail as opposed to 42. It's, for me anyway, it's a lot more secure. I know this is not about me, but
we also talked about a lot of folks, we have a lot of rental homes, folks coming for the summer, roof decks with that only 36-inch railing. We want to make that uniform between the commercial establishments that they go to and the homes that they may be renting.
Right. With the roof decks, and roof decks now have wet bars and there's a lot of activity, especially with the rentals, a lot more activity up there. So we just feel it would be a lot safer to have that in place. We also talked about the overall height. Right now, I don't know, somewhere along the line with a flat roof, the maximum height is 25 feet from the grade to the flat roof. Over time, we have allowed to put a 3-foot glass rail on top of that 25 feet. But once again, there's other things going on that patio now, which could be obstructions. You're 3 feet higher, you're on top of the 25-foot flat roof.
So like a 60-inch, a 70-inch TV.
Oh yeah, TVs, like wet bars. I see some outdoor, some barbecues, and so we just feel that would bring it back down to reality and keep the top of the rail, no matter what the material is, at 25 feet. I think everybody agrees on the reduction of the overall size of gross floor area from 20,000 to 10,000. There's not many 20,000 square feet house. There's one being built right now, but there's not many of them out there.
But there are 12,000 and 15,000.
Yeah, I see that, and that's obviously not including the basement. We don't include GFA in the basement, so these houses, the massing is pretty big. So by cutting that in half, I think that's actually a reasonable request, and So I think we all agreed on, that's probably the only thing that we all agreed on all the time. The height limits, maximum height limits on accessory structures. For me, once again, out in the field, I've seen a lot of, like Kate explained before, right now, there's no cap, no zone max height on accessory structures. It could be the same height as your house. Gable roof, 30 to 32 feet, flat roof, 25. I got one on my desk right now. It is 30-foot high garage, 600 square feet footprint. They got literally a second floor. They drop in a collar tie so it doesn't look like habitable space. But that, to me, that is, it's going to be living space eventually. They had a fixed stair going up. Once again, this limit on the max height on accessory structures is not going to affect affordable accessory apartments. ADUs will still maintain that in the code, so you can have an apartment above our garage. But for pool houses, we have the height, accessory structures garage is a flat height limit, flat roof height limit, and then there's the pitched roof, which gives you the availability to have some storage above, like loft, but would not have any overall massing and being the same height as the house. Separation from, right now we use 5-foot separation as our goal or guide to, that defines separation. Anything closer is going to be included in the same structure. You got two accessory structures, say 2 feet apart. That's one big structure. But right now we use 5 feet. We just want to expand that a little bit to 10 feet to just give a little more room, a little bit more air, a little bit more space. And it maybe wouldn't kind of give you the effect of that overall massing. It might reduce it a little bit. Because technically right now you can have two pool houses 5 feet apart. They each have a 18-inch overhang. They're basically touching in the middle, So we'll have that clear 10-foot separation.
So there's no limit to the number of pool houses that you can have on a property?
No.
Lot coverage.
Except for lot coverage.
Yeah, it's just building coverage, lot coverage, but there's no limit to accessory structures.
And you're seeing also these structures attached by a single roof as well, correct?
Well, we have it in code. I mean, you could have two accessory structures. Once again, we'll say I see a lot like a pool house, and then they call it a cabana or just a changing room, and I'll have a patio in the middle with a covered with a hard roof over top. As long as it's open on both sides, it's open air appendage. It's allowed by the code right now.
Yeah, so we'd be changing that in this
A little
round.
bit, yeah.
Yeah.
Other than that, we went over, Charlie explained all the changes to the code, the language in the codes. I think it's important. So one thing that I think we all agreed upon too is not having the lower level extend beyond the footprint of the house. It's just, you can literally, on a small lot, you could literally have the entire basement the size of your lot right now, the way the code reads. So we just want to keep that limited to the footprint. We also talked about the limit of 300 square feet egress. You'll have your required egress, whether it's a well or stair. It also gives you the little ability maybe to have a patio below grade, a full walkout, but it keeps it limited. Not the whole side of the house like we see. You drive down a road and it looks like 3 stories, but that'll keep it limited, and it's a lot less excavation and disruption to the soil and to natural resources.
And the 300 square foot was important because these egresses are actually for fire code. God forbid there's a fire. That's why you have to have multiple egresses in your underground level. And for me, I didn't want it to be, I think the state code's pretty small on what you can do, one person at a time egressing. And for me, it's important that you get more people out at once. So 300 square foot, you can get out more people, which is really what they're about, and also allows you to bring some light down into your lower level space.
Right. Yeah, a lot of light. Like light, you can have light well as long as it doesn't exceed that 300 square feet. You have some availability, some flexibility. You can be creative. That's pretty much it, I think, as far, if you have any questions, anybody has any questions about some of the codes that we went over?
I do, Joe. So I just follow up a couple of questions. So with the 300-foot egress, does that include the stairs themselves, or is that just the below subterranean?
That's cumulative. That's cumulative. That's your stair, your egress wells, which are only 9 square feet by code is all you need for a escape and rescue well, but that would include stair too.
And then as far as attached, right now, in the past, it's been non-habitable space or non-conditioned space. If it's detached garage, attached with overhang. So anything that's physically attached to the principal structure will be counted as part of the principal structure.
Correct.
And that's with a roof overhang, even if it doesn't have any walls on the sides, not conditioned, anything that's physically attached.
If it's attached to the principal structure, say it's a porch or an overhang, it's not included in GFA. But we do have that in the code when it comes to accessory structures. We want to keep a pool house. Pool house is the only accessory structure that can have plumbing, so we keep it limited to 200 square feet. For
artist studio, but with bathroom, with a toilet and shower. Yes, I understand.
Right, plumbing. And we kind of took that out of the code. You see a 200 square foot pool house and a 600 square foot covered patio, and it's just
massive.
Yeah.
I have one more on there if you don't mind. I guess I'm almost getting to what's our next steps, Kate? What are we gonna get to?
We still have two call. Denise wanted to speak. Chris DeSuno's on. I don't know if we have more people on the phone. Do we want to take their comment now and then have a discussion?
Sure.
I think that's what we should do at this point. So Denise, why don't you?
Thank you.
Go ahead.
One more thing. I just want to say thanks again, and we really want to see this go to the next step and actually see our accomplishments on paper and get them into code. And it also got me involved in my own community now. So
how did
I got a meeting tomorrow night. Yeah.
What is that? Explain.
A lot of things going on in the town of Riverhead. So
once you start, you can't stop.
Well, town board, they were trying to push through that agritourism business and.
As I said, weekends.
So now you have experience at the podium.
And there was another person in the back of the room that had his hand up before to speak, so I don't think we caught it.
Okay, for the record, my name is Denise Savarese, and I'm here as a member of the Zoning Code Amendment Working Group, and I have prepared a statement I'd like to have entered into the record. I first came to East Hampton in 1969. I was, for lack of another term, a summer person. I fell in love with the beauty and solitude of this area. I've always lived in Springs, which at that time was a place for artists and musicians to congregate and reside. Early on in my life, I made a lot of changes to be able to move to East Hampton full-time, and now I can say I have lived in this town full-time since 1974. I married and raised my 2 sons, Louis and James, and all these years later, I have never regretted making these choices. I am fortunate that my sons continue to live and work in their hometown. However, if you have lived in this town as a year-round resident since 1985, the year in which our current code was kind of last updated, you have seen how the town has really changed. You're blind if you have not seen the damage to our infrastructure. This is a 40-year-old code which indirectly dictates and is accepting of the overdevelopment that is going on. Loopholes in the code allow this, and our committee is actually trying to address these loopholes. My hope is that you, as our town board, will support these recommended changes. Updating the code to address environmental concerns is the responsible action to take for the sake of the town and the people who live in it. We would be remiss to not update the code considering sea level rising, climate change, and other unforeseen threats that we don't know that we're going to face. I have been on this committee since its inception. It is not my desire to police properties. It is my desire to protect the properties, protect surrounding neighborhoods, protect our property values, and above all else, protect the environment. It is my desire to educate people about the importance and significance of wetlands, primary dunes, vegetation, scenic easements, coverage, and clearing of properties. We now encourage IA systems. This is a result of additional knowledge that we now know will further protect each parcel. The overdevelopment of smaller lots in this town is a key component for change. There'll be no going back if we don't take a stand now. Town board members, this is about being on the right side of history and holding a public hearing to adopt the changes that are before you. And dealing with the loopholes in the code will be a major step toward preserving our habitat. This committee has much additional work to do. So allow this process to move on so we can get back to work and move on to natural resources. We're running out of time. We have to act now. Time is of the essence. I also have to take a moment to applaud Councilmember Kate Rogers for taking on this project, since this is not popular. But it is the right thing to do, and Kate Rogers is not known to back down to a challenge. So now we all have an opportunity, all of us working together, to move forward in a positive way in addressing the overdevelopment that is taking place in this town every single day. At the last town board meeting, I'm almost done. At the last town board meeting, this subject attracted many town residents who showed up to voice their support for these code amendment changes. This was a moment for me because it made me realize as a committee member, the work we are doing is very important and necessary in terms of protecting the natural resources we take for granted every day. So in closing, let us as a community work together. Let us not sell out to overdevelopment without further protection and restrictions in our town code by addressing the loopholes. Let us protect what we stand for and why people come here. Let us prosper and grow as a community. It is time to act. I urge this town board to act and move swiftly, schedule a public hearing, and take a stand to be on the right side of history. I thank you for your time.
Thank you, Denise. Did you want to speak?
Hello, everyone. Thank you for your time. For the record, I'm Tripoli Patterson. I'm the owner of Tripoli Gallery in Wainscott. I was born in Sag Harbor on John Street in 1984 and have been running and producing exhibitions on the East End since 2005. My gallery opened on Job's Lane in Southampton in 2019, and since 2009, and since 2019, my new location is in Wainscott, right next to, on the corner of Eastgate Road and Montauk Highway. Because my lot is on Ardsley Road, it was an abandoned road, so there's a lot of confusion in the navigations of how to get to my gallery. There's a lot of people that are trying to enter my gallery through like buy home goods and through that parking lot. So I've been trying to have a directional sign located on the corner to help traffic and the confusion of traffic in that already kind of backed up area in front of my location where there's always, it's basically always traffic. And I'm having a hard time with keeping that sign because it keeps on being taken away. So I'm just asking for permission to erect a directional sign to help that traffic, help my customers find my gallery, and also to also help congestion of traffic and people trying to find the right way to enter. And then just a final note, I feel like I'm a local person. I feel like my business is a cultural business. My younger brother is young Jake, and he was the first artist who was born in the Hamptons to be given a show at Guildhall. I operate my business year-round. I have tours with kids from the Bridgeham Community Center. I speak at the Hayground School, and it's, my business is very much involved in the community and the history of the arts on Long Island. And with a little support and assistance, I hope to continue doing shows and catering to the art community on the East End.
Okay, thank you. Why don't you leave your number with our deputy clerk?
Okay.
And somebody can reach out to you.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you. All right, Jason, if you could let Chris DeSuno in, because I believe he's holding. Thank you.
Hello, Chris DeSuno. Are you still there?
I am still here.
All right, and you are live.
Thank you. My name is Christopher DeSuno. I'm a local architect, born and raised here in East Hampton. Thank you, Kathy and Kate and the rest of the town board for attempting to address all these code issues that we have going on. As the board is aware, I've been working with a dozen other local professionals that live and practice and care about how structures and massing and environmental impacts affect our neighborhoods. It is important to reiterate as architects and other local professionals, although it is our job and livelihood to design buildings, aesthetics are far more important and of concern to us than size. We do not approve of a massive building for the sake of massive building. Our committee submitted a letter with our consensus thoughts. As you know, we agree with the majority of the proposals that are proposed, and with some minor tweaks still need to be addressed from what we saw today. However, I think we're on the right track. I would like to speak briefly about a new idea that has not been endorsed by our group or proposed yet. This idea addresses the iceberg houses, the garage areas, the cellars, whether they're finished or unfinished, and GFA could all be addressed in a much simpler way, I think, than is what is proposed currently. It will both be more enforceable and limit house size by adding a new definition to the building code, along with the updated and restored code regarding the cellar and basement definition with regards to its exposure as it was back in the 90s. This possible revision would address these concerns. The idea would be to remove the cellar from the GFA as it is currently proposed, and that we would add a total GFA definition that would include all of the areas of the house, the cellar, and the garage. The current GFA definition should be redefined so as to reduce the above-ground massing as it's already being proposed. I think we agree that we should include an additional 600 square feet for garage space, and the reason for that is that that code allowance would encourage attached garages and reduce site coverage and sprawl. The additional garage space would then be part of the allowable GFA above ground, allowing for the freedom of use, but still limiting mass. If cellars are handled separately, I'm proposing that an entirely new definition for total GFA. This would be a supplement to the revised GFA code. This idea would be a dramatic simplification as to what we're proposing and give the same results. In principle, the code would read as total GFA equals the existing above ground plus 1/3 for underground basement space. This would apply regardless whether it's a finished or unfinished basement. It greatly simplifies the calculation process, and it also prevents many currently compliant homes that are reasonable in scale from becoming non-conforming. It eliminates the need to be concerned about iceberg houses, as anything larger than the 1/3 of the above-ground GFA would be a displacement of that above-ground GFA and be absorbed into the total GFA. This proposal does not put an undue burden on local families that need an expanded space for extended multi-generational family. The finished definition, as was just proposed, is a bit of a problem with compliance with the current energy code, as we now have to insulate cellars, all of the walls and ceilings and floors, and so this definition would no longer be required. There would be no ambiguity as to if one area is insulated to meet code and not finished or finished. I think property taxes and real estate agents can be given the required code so that they're being presented as a compliant house. And those numbers should present accordingly. A basement is limited by the size of the building coverage, which includes all of the accessory structures. And I know it was mentioned earlier, but nowhere have we been allowed to do multiple pool houses. I think that was mentioned earlier. There's only one pool house per property. As an aside, and this is less of a concern of my own, but we were talking about sport courts in the basements. Currently the code requires a 50-foot separation from adjacent residential properties. That prevents sport courts on many properties due to lot size and house location. And, just speaking for myself, if my neighbor wanted to put in a basketball court in their basement, it's a lot quieter for my own life. I wouldn't be opposed to that. But, again, this is something that, if it's not affecting the water table, and I'm 130 feet above the water table where I live. So, but anyway, thank you for listening. I think our committee is going to be really excited to dig into what has been written here, and hopefully we can make some nice adjustments to get this to go forward and be passed. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Okay. Do we want to call for comment from the town board?
Sure. Well, I think firstly, as many have said, thank you to all the team in the committee for putting this together. It's an extensive and I think very well done piece of research. I do have one or two questions. They're a little scattered as I kind of read through this. But, just firstly, one thing to consider with clearing, I know, at least with my property, and I think many properties, you will leave certain portions of your property to be native species, and then you have invasive species come in that completely rip it out. So, how we go about managing those kind of situations? Do we then give people permission if they can show that, no, this area that was historically considered to be native species has now been infested by invasive species and does need clearing in order for us to kind of go back to a more natural environment? I think that's something to consider there. I think it's very helpful having heard from the community on both pyramid calculations and kind of the general role of how this impacts the community. I certainly hope that pyramid discussions are the next step of what this committee will be able to look at as we kind of get past these first hurdles as well. With regards to limitations on accessory buildings, I'm slightly concerned by the terming accessory building or structure may include, and then we have a list. It does seem a little bit open-ended. And I'm just wondering if there's ways to...
Are you reading that? Can you just tell me the code
Page
section?
12, the limitations on accessory buildings, Chapter 255, 1123, Section A. The term accessory building or structure may include private detached garage, garden shed, private greenhouse, pool house, or other similar building conforming to definition of accessory building. It just leaves it open-ended. Would a gazebo be considered in there? So how do we then kind of... either I feel that you need to have a definitive list here, but I think the word may is just going to lead to open-ended discussion. What's next on here? Yeah, ADUs. Thank you very much for including that piece on ADUs in this piece. I do have one question I will bring back to my ADU committee as well, which is what would happen with finished space were the homeowner to then decide after 5 years that they didn't want an ADU. Now, the way the code currently written is if they have a finished kitchen, they would be required to pull the entire kitchen out and return it back just to a regular living space. Would they also be required, if they're over GFA allowance, to pull out the finished areas and then convert a finished basement back to an unfinished basement? I just think it would be helpful to have some clarity there, just as we kind of look to roll out the ADU program, just to advise people accordingly. I think other than that, I think one of the most telling things I've heard today was from Kevin Buns, and again, that's 2 in a row, so he's doing very well. I think this code really does speak to some incredible challenges we're facing as a community. I think we're definitively moving in the right direction with this, and I think it was Dan Mongan said, in so many ways you can't go far enough because we really are seeing a degradation of our most important asset, and I think it's important for us as board members also call out in the first hearing session we had, it was a very different crowd that came to that meeting. It was a lot of people from the real estate and the building industry who were very concerned about this. And, I think we have to acknowledge that there are financial implications for industries with this, but I think it's one where you have to look at short-term investment versus long-term investment. Okay, I think one of the reasons this area is so incredibly popular is we have been so successful with protecting our environment. It is, as the chair of the Chamber of Commerce has said many times, our environment's our economy. And, if we want this place to have value as homeowners and investors 10 or 20 years from now, this legislation is critical. So those are my 2 pieces.
Thank you, Tom. David, did you want to?
I'll go ahead, Ian, if you want first.
Sure. Yeah, I think, I agree with a lot of what Tom said. And, generally, I think that this has been really good to watch as a new person on the town board to see. I know it was being worked on way before my time. We came, as Tom said, there was sort of a different crowd the first time around. We've heard from all members of the community. Whatever anybody thinks about where we land on this, the process, I think, has been a really good and constructive one. Certainly transparent, open to everybody, and I very much appreciate that. And beyond that, I appreciate Kate's initiative and everybody else involved to recognize that the code needs to change. The code is not something that's going to be set in stone forever. We don't get it right every time. Whatever we come out with here, it's probably not going to be perfect, and a future board will hopefully continue to improve it to make our town the best it can be. As Tom said, I think that there's, we've heard from a lot of people, and all the comments are very inspiring. But I'll admit that I've heard from the other side as well. The group that showed up during the first meeting who was sort of scared of anything that we would do. And I've heard that anecdotally throughout town. So I think it's important that we recognize some people who are concerned with overreach. And admittedly, some of those people I don't think understand the details of this code, but I just want to acknowledge sort of the emotional concerns or appeal on both sides. A, that we're trying to protect our environment, protect our town, and B, they're trying to take everything from us. Well, in reality, I think that the details really do matter. And I think that what we need to do is identify the problem and do our best to precisely address it. And to me, the overarching problem, there's a lot of nuance, but the overarching problem is mass. When you drive around town, you say, oh my God, what's happened to our town? All these houses are so huge, it doesn't look the same. And with that in mind, I know there's other things too, consumption, excess, sustainability, all of these things definitely matter. But if I were to sort of distill it, I think that the massing of houses is the sort of impetus for this project. I wholeheartedly agree with closing loopholes, 3-story houses that, are somehow called 2. And I was really encouraged by even builders and real estate people who sort of were resistant to some of what is being proposed here, basically acknowledge that, that we shouldn't allow that. There are loopholes that should be closed. So I wholeheartedly agree with the loopholes, and that's most of this. The one thing, or a couple of things that I have some concerns about is that if we are if we are really trying to identify the problem, and that's mass, and we're at a future date going to address the formula, because to be clear, we are not addressing the formula here in terms of what can be built above ground. There's some details there where we're addressing it. But if we are going to go through that exercise, I would like to do it at the same time that we're addressing the basement GFA. I was surprised to hear how much builders and real estate people were really worried about losing the basement exemption, so to speak. At the first meeting, I said that it makes sense to include it in something. It's part of your house. Do I think the 600 feet exception and then half after that makes sense? I do. I think that sounds like a very fair compromise. I'm not saying it's unreasonable, and not even saying that it's not where we eventually shouldn't land. What I'm concerned about is if we do this now, and then the next step is to say, oh, we want to talk about the formula upstairs, we're going to get less reduction of mass than if we sort of talked about it all together. I think there's going to be a contingency of people who are really resistant the next time this comes up and says, you just took away so much of our basement space that now we don't want to give something that I was surprised to hear a lot of builders. Now, the proof will be in the pudding, so to speak. I don't know that they would come back and say, yeah, we're willing to reduce the above ground building. But a lot of people said that directly, that we want to keep the basement, exemption, but we're open to talking about overall mass reduction. So I'm just a little bit worried about sort of segmenting this. Again, overall, I think it's a great concept. I think that the compromise or the back and forth, you landed on a place that makes sense to me. I just worry that long term, we might end up with less of what we're going for, which is, large structures that we see as we drive around town. But we'll see what I support this going to public hearing for sure. I want to hear, and again, the details matter. I think that we can talk emotionally about how our town is being lost, or the other side, that the town board is taking everything away from us. But the words that go into the code that dictate the houses that are being built are the important part. So I encourage everybody to look very closely, not at the concepts only, but of the words, because the houses that we saw being built, 20 years ago, people understood were prohibited, but they weren't, because the words weren't precise enough to not allow for the things that we all agree were sort of excessive. So I look forward to sort of more conversation and more detailed comments from all members of the public, so that as this hopefully progresses, we can refine it. The last comment I want to make is one that I made previously, and I may be wrong on this, and I certainly might be in the minority, but I do worry about the accessory structure. Tom kind of hinted on this with ADUs, but specifically for me, the accessory structure height. If somebody proposes a new accessory structure with an ADU in the upstairs, that accessory structure is going to be taller potentially than would be allowed if that ADU stops. So what happens? Do they have to take the top off of that garage, or does it become pre-existing non-conforming instantly? And I don't know. I don't want to discourage somebody from doing an ADU who then thinks I'm forever locked into having this sort of, I hope that they choose to keep an affordable apartment forever, but being forced into it, or they'd have to tear their garage down. I don't know what the implications of that would be. I would ask Rob or Joe or anybody else, but I agree with the sort of idea, the concept there, of reducing accessory structure height for the overall appearance. But I am very concerned, as somebody who feels strongly about affordable housing and accessory dwelling units. I don't know how those two things are going to interplay, and I want to be very, very careful about that. But, again, thanks to everybody. I really do respect the process and that Kate has sort of led here, and everybody in the public who's been involved.
So, if you don't mind, as far as anything that would be for an ADU, I think you have to take the language out of the code for an artist studio, and that they would have to become compliant with whatever the structure is, and if that's either for the height, the size, or the plumbing that might be in, they would have to come back to compliance. We already see it within the accessory artist studios. I think would have to be done with the ADU also, and you would have to make that decision based on your finances and desire or need. Moving into page 6, chapter 255, 120, gross floor area. I'm very comfortable with all this right now, including the new C, D, and E. I would be definitely willing to listen a little bit deeper into a discussion as far as a discussion on a new total gross floor area that would be 1/3. But right now, I think this is very fair. on there. There's a lot of give and pull back now to be able to get the 600 square feet in the basement, but at the same time, knowing that more than that would be actually counted to your overall GFA. Going into definitions on there, yes, I thank you very much for making this more simplistic on there, and with redefining what the cellar is into a basement and more finished and unfinished, and I would have to leave that to the professionals that we have in our building department to make that decision as you move forward during C of O inspections or during review of building plans. Going into the basement egresses, I thank the committee for listening to me. I do think a light well and an egress that can actually have some light and some extendable space is warranted. As I look here for 300 square feet, it's a nice size area that you might have. I do see that there might be ways in which individuals might want to put one, or is this an aggregate for all egresses, or this is just one egress that might just be lined up as total? So meaning if it's one stairwell and open, others, I don't know how that would move forward. But again, I do appreciate the committee listening to that, because I think that is a nice feature on homes. Basement size is over 15 square feet. Charlie, I think that's appropriate. It does match where we're seeing other sections of the code. Specifically, it wouldn't be a second story on there, if you want to say, or count it as a second story. And also going outside the bounds of the principal structure, I think is just valid on there then too. Page 10, height definitions and structure and buildings of the story on there then too. Yes. Lowest adjacent exterior grade and the height on there. These are all things that we're starting to see are those loopholes, as we've heard discussed, and I think they are well intended in the languages. A place where I could see moving it forward. Accessory building definitions 255-120 on page 12. I wanted to hear from you, Joe, what's going to be attached or not then too. You know, if it's going to be attached and those things, I think the general public wants to hear that, the definition, so they can design the type of property that they want within the code. I think a lot of this, the next steps, if we get the public hearing, which I would like to go to and post that, is also either definitions, public information, outreach also, or even potentially even designing architectural renderings of what we're discussing. A picture goes to, a long way, as long as with language. I think that's going to be a good thing moving forward. But now I understand it, and I appreciate moving forward with those aspects also. Limitations on the accessory buildings as far as height, I completely agree with those then too. I guess maybe I'm becoming a little more cynical as I sit up here for longer I stay here. But yes, dropping collar ties, I've seen that multiple times when individuals are coming in the zoning board with past members and others, that it just happens, and then they go, oops, and they want then a variance on it, and it's in there. Once you have precedent, it's difficult to come back in the court of law. ADUs and affordable accessory apartments, I thank you for changing that, looking into that. We don't want to get into a point where we're taking one of our greatest initiatives as far as our all hands on housing and our affordable housing, and then also find ourselves stuck with that as we are trying to work for massing, because I do believe it's massing on there then too. So I think that appropriate deep look in the last 4 months has been appreciated, to go through the code and see all the languages on there. I will be in probably on page 14, maximum gross floor area. I'll probably be in the minority here. I don't think decreasing everything to 10,000 square feet is necessarily appropriate. I don't think 20,000 is. I could see 15,000, or we can do a predetermined on your zoning district also. 10,000 square foot house would be about, 2.25 acres-ish on there then too. But there's a lot of areas that might be 5 acre zoning, 10 acre zoning that I could see a larger house on a larger lot area where there's also other large lot areas in there. I would be fine with that. But again, we can continue that discussion and maybe get it to the public also then too. Depth of groundwater, no brainer. Minimum railing height. Listen, I love a good roof deck as much as anyone else. I love looking for a roof deck or a roof deck restaurant when I travel. Then too, but I have little kids, and I also have my own fears of heights then too. So increasing that, I think, is just better for public safety and it conform with the state law. Survey requirements, there is a caveat in there up to the building inspector's discretion, so I'm comfortable with that too. And with that, Kate, I thank you for your effort. I think I said this the first time. I don't think it was enough. I think this is landing a little bit better, as we all are doing. I look forward to potentially taking this and seeing what the general public says next also. That's what I have to say. Thank you for your time.
Yeah, and this has been an incredible process, and we've heard from a lot of community members as we've moved forward. If I go the way Joe did, working backwards, the 2-foot topography on surveys with the building inspector's discretion, I support. Increasing the railing height, I do as well. The 2-foot separation, how we measure the overall height to the top of any railing, reducing maximum gross floor area to 10,000 square feet, I'm supportive of. I do have a question with when we talk about adding new limitations on the maximum height of accessory structures. We did receive a letter from the group that Chris, just so you know, has been working with. And their point in the letter was imposing a height limitation will likely render hundreds of existing accessory structures non-conforming without achieving any defined goal expressed by the discussion. In many cases, artificially limiting the height may cause discordant visual impacts that we can't assess. The height of accessory structures has never been identified as a problem outside of this limited discussion, and imposing a significant limitation will only create nonconformities on existing residence structures that were built in full compliance with current codes. So I don't know, Joe, if you received a copy of this letter.
I did not.
Okay.
So I just want to address the idea of nonconformity in general. Every time we change the code, we now have nonconforming structures. That's part of what we do. The good part about having something deemed nonconforming pre-existing is that it limits the expansion on those structures, so there still is an impact on existing structures. If we ever stop because we're worried about creating non-conforming pre-existing, we have never changed a code since 1984. Every time we've done that, we've created, and when you're working in this world, as Chris knows, non-conforming pre-existing is something that you deal with on a daily basis. But it does limit the expansion to the existing footprint. You can't make it bigger. So that has, I would respectfully disagree with that opinion. It certainly has an impact on existing structures.
And if I could just add one, what Councilmember Rogers says, I agree with what she just stated as far as becoming now a pre-existing condition on there. That's also one of the reasons why we went with updated C of Os. We try to find whatever triggers that there might be within the land use or within the real estate markets to be able to make sure that we now have properties being inspected. So there is a papered aspect that we can go back and use as your baseline on there then too. Going back to accessory structures and size, this comes to massing. With an accessory structure, the accessory structure setbacks are not necessarily the same depending on the lot size of a principal structure. So when you're having the same exact height as a principal structure for an accessory structure that has a lesser of a setback, that's much more of a massing to the outer edges of the property and to your neighborhood then too. So I do see that as an overall issue.
And I just want to talk about, if I may, Kathy,
Sure.
I'm sorry to interrupt you. I also respectfully disagree that this is only about massing. The 2005 comprehensive plan, we recognize the issues with mass and scale. And in the vision statements and the goals of that comprehensive plan, that was very well stated. Mass and scale has a visual impact upon East Hampton. It changes East Hampton every time we reduce the air and space around houses, the ability of light to filter through. I lived in a town that you could go property line to property line. People didn't in the past, and you could see between the houses. You could experience the greenery between the houses. So mass and scale are extremely important to what we lose when we allow too much mass and scale. However, it's not the only issue in the comprehensive plan that we're supposed to be compliant with. It's not just about mass and scale. And if you go past the comprehensive plan and read all of the subsequently adopted plans, we talk about consumption of materials. We talk about energy usage. We talk about all these things, and we have recommendations in these plans to reduce, to keep it within a sustainable footprint. And that's what we're looking to do with these codes. We can no longer in 2024 talk about only mass and scale.
Could I just say, I think I brought that up originally, and Kate's right. It's more than just that, of course. But when it comes to sustainability and energy consumption, everything I've learned is that basements are really advantageous in that way. So the energy consumption component of things actually goes into my thought that we should talk about GFA in the basements in concert with upstairs, because I think it's related.
I agree with that, Ian, but in terms of consumption, when you're looking at 2,000, 4,000 square foot basements with bowling alleys and spas, that is outside of what we intended in 1984 for a basement to be. None of those materials, none of that energy consumption is included. So in today's world, I'm not quite sure that older idea that it's more efficient, less energy efficient to put it below ground exists anymore, because of what we're seeing in the development trends. And they're not underground anymore, they're pulled out of the ground.
So if I could just, if I could finish. So I support the definitions. I support eliminating the iceberg houses and limiting the depth of basements. But I do agree with Ian that I think the formula and what we count for basements go hand in hand. So I'm not personally comfortable with the recommendation that we don't count 600 and then we go to 50%. I think that it has to be, for me, it has to be a holistic conversation discussing formula and basements. Because particularly since we're going to 10,000 square feet, I mean, we're cutting the maximum gross floor area in half. And so to me, I want to have that conversation together.
So next steps?
Next steps?
Does the board feel we're ready to go to public hearing?
Well, maybe we have some walk around discussions, see what we want to pull out of this to make sure we get a consensus to what we want to bring the public hearing on. But I think that for me, I'm comfortable with the majority of this, bring the public hearing. I understand the other board members' concerns with, basements and
So if we pulled out the basement recommendation, would you be comfortable going to a public hearing on all of the other issues?
I would.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, I'm basically comfortable going to public hearing as is. These are just my thoughts at this moment. At the public hearing, I assume that we'll all learn more.
Well, yeah.
I mean, we can tweet, as we did with other codes, we can hear it in a public hearing and then make the changes afterwards, after we have a robust discussion with the public.
That's correct. I think that, and even if we wanted to have the public hearing be, separated, in which the basement might be different, then I don't know if we can do it. I'll let the attorneys state that as we go to pull it out. But yeah, Kate, we can do that. I think what's happened is that there's been a lot of public discussion. There's been, first of all, a lot of hard work. Okay, not just from the town board members, community members, the zoning code amendment groups. So I think everyone's deserved to hear what the public wants to say on the public record. I think we'll be making sure that we bring a lot of water and some snacks too.
So I'm ready to go to public hearing and hear the comments on the suite that's been.
Just because you have a public hearing doesn't mean it's going to be passed or moved forward. At least we might get some more information. But I think we're at that point right now, personally, in my humble opinion.
Yeah, sure. I could support that.
Okay, so Rob, we can move on to the last topic we have, which is the draft ethics code amendments.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, guys. Well done. Good job.
It's a nice room.
You ready?
Okay.
Oh, I'm sorry, I was just.
Oh, no. At the outset, I just want to make clear that I'm proposing this on my own volition. None of the members of the town board asked me to draft this proposed amendment.
So we're talking about draft ethics code amendments, correct?
Correct. It came about, I was asked to look into the ethics code before the summer started, whether or not a town board member was allowed or permitted to bring a spouse with them to an event where the ticket was complimentary. So I looked at the ethics code, sought an opinion from the ethics board, and the answer was no. And when I was looking at the code, I think it's a little bit antiquated and doesn't really take into account the current climate. As town board members, part of your job is to go to events, to forge relationships with members of charitable organizations, business community, members of the community, to build connections so that you can do the work of the people of East Hampton. A lot of these events, the tickets are more than $75. The current ethics code does not permit you to accept a gift of $75 or more. I think it's important that as members of the town board, you do go to these events. I don't think there's anything nefarious about you accepting tickets if they're over $75. And I know for me, I don't want to go to these events alone. I would want to have, my wife with me. So I'm proposing that the ethics code be changed to become more in line with what New York State allows and what the city of New York has allowed in ethics opinions. In New York State, there's several exceptions to the gifts law that allow state officers and employees to accept complimentary attendance, including food and beverage at bona fide charitable events or bona fide political events. The City of New York, the New York Conflicts of Interest Board, in an advisory opinion in 2000, found that an elected official may accept tickets to certain events regardless of price, and in that opinion also stated that the member or the elected official or member of staff is permitted to accept one complimentary guest ticket without running afoul of the law. So I'm proposing that our ethics code, it's section 25A1, certain actions prohibited, read as follows. No municipal officer or employee shall directly or indirectly solicit any gift or accept or receive any gift of having a value of $75 or more, whether in the form of money, service, loan, travel, entertainment, hospitality, thing or promise, or in any other form under circumstances in which it could reasonably be inferred that the gift was intended to influence him or her, or could reasonably be expected to influence him or her in the performance of his or her official duties, or was intended as a reward for any official action on his or her part. And this is where I would add this section. Notwithstanding the foregoing, it shall be permissible for a municipal officer or employee to intend, as part of his or her official duties, a function of an organization composed of representatives of business, labor, professions, news media, or organizations of a civic, charitable, or community nature when invited by the sponsoring organization, regardless of the price which the public may be charged for a ticket to the event, and regardless of whether his or her office provides funding for that organization. It shall also be permissible for the municipal officer or employee to accept one complimentary guest ticket. So that's basically the gist of what I'm proposing. As I've stated before, I think it's important that members of the town board be at these events so that you can continue to do the work for the people of the town.
Thank you, Rob. Board members have comments, questions?
I guess my only one comment is why not have any financial cap on the ticket piece? Now, I understand like 75 might be low, especially out here where things can run into the thousands, but a $2,000 event. I mean, is that excessive? I mean, what kind of benefit? Why is it a $2,000 event?
No, that's absolutely something that we could add into the.
I mean, I think it's what I've seen over the years is that sometimes, events, it's, wine and, crudité and cheese, and it's $1,000 a ticket, but that's because it's the audience that they're catering to, and it's the event or the charitable organization that they're trying to raise money for, where the folks that are going to be drawn to that event can write a check for $1,000 the way I might write a check for $50. Right. So it's really, the folks that are putting these events on know their audiences. So, I mean, that's just what I've observed, in the 10 plus years that I've been on the town board.
It's not uncommon for a lot of these events to have $1,500 tickets to get in the door.
Right. Yeah, I mean, that's just my personal opinion. I would like to see it capped.
I've learned from being on the town board, I know if you look at this from the other side of this table, you go, well, why the hell should they get anything? Excuse my language. It could, influence people. It could be this, it could be that. But what I have found from actually doing the job and paying for my ticket, when we go to support organizations, it's impactful and it's meaningful to the organizations that are doing so much work in our community, that we acknowledge the work that they do by coming to an event that they're putting on. It has much more value for them than it would ever have if I was gifted a ticket. And also is we are, nonstop doing what we do. It gives us another opportunity to be able to hear from the community. As Ian said, I've heard it anecdotally. We've all said this. I've heard it anecdotally. And a lot of times where people don't have the time to come to a public hearing, you'll get feedback on what's going on in the town too. So that is also super important when you're attending these events. It's certainly not for crudité and drinks that make this important. It's we're going out, again, basically in the summer, this becomes a 7-day-a-week job. And you get a lot of good information out there when you do, show up. And again, as I said, I have really seen it be important to people that we do show up. And by showing up, our presence there supports what they're doing in the community and acknowledges it. Right. So I'm fine with what you've written.
Yeah, I don't really have any comments or questions.
And I, to the point where being able to bring a guest or a significant other with you, a lot of these events in the summer are, Saturday nights, Friday nights, Sunday afternoons. And sometimes it's the only time you get to see your significant other because of the demands of the job. So I'm supportive. I think we could take this to notice it for public hearing on the 19th. I think it would also help the ethics committee. It'll cut down on, requests for opinions they may get, so that it's, clearly stated. And now that it's, would be what you're proposing is in line with what is, in the state of New York and the opinion of the city of New York. So it just makes sense. Okay, now we're going to move on to liaison reports. And folks, if we could, recognize that it's 2:00.
I'll read fast. There is quite a lot.
Awesome.
So Armageddon Citizens Advisory Committee, we met last night. There was a detailed presentation given and discussion on the Devon Yacht Club, in particular some of the changes they're looking to implement: storm resiliency, wetland management, disability access, employee housing, common themes. There was also a great deal of discussion as to whether I, as a board member, can bring an advisory vote of the CAC to the liaison report. Position I took in the room, and I think, Rob, you actually kind of highlighted it.
Sorry, I didn't catch it. What was it?
This was whether the Citizens Advisory Committee could have an advisory vote on whether they approved of the plans for Devon Yacht Club, and whether I would kind of bring that vote to the board.
Now, about an application that's before the planning.
Exactly, and I just want to explain this to everybody, because I've got Rob's kind of verbiage. We said, no, we cannot do that in this meeting, and I just kind of want to, Rob wrote something this morning with regards to something else, I think sums it up very well. It's like the town board does not assert its influence over the independence of its appointed boards or its chief's building inspector. So the ZBA is an independent board from the town board. They're appointed. We do not interfere with them whatsoever, which is why I'm not bringing that commentary back from the CAC.
ZBA, planning board, ARB,
exactly.
Any of that.
Just making very clear to the CAC on that.
They can give their opinions as individuals.
Exactly, and that's what they're instructed to do.
At that venue.
Exactly.
That really hasn't changed over the years either.
There was also a discussion around Michael Jordan's presentation of the field park plan, discussion of wildlife management, clearing. There was kind of mixed opinion on the presence of a playground in that facility. There was also kind of mixed opinion coming back on whether they should have dogs. I think generally the consensus was that dogs on leashes would be acceptable. There was also given by Tom Field himself a kind of very interesting history of the land that actually used to be cornfields, and there was very little vegetation there, and everything growing there currently has just kind of come by it naturally. The one really good thing that did come out of that meeting is that Tom did kind of agree that it would be suitable to name the field after his father if the board be amenable to that, Herbert Field. So that will be helpful. The members of the CAC also presented a Cranberry Hall Road bridge petition. They got close to 200 signatures. They'll be sending that to the town board, Governor Hochul, New York congressman, and the candidates for Congress and New York government as well.
Take a step back.
Yeah, this is a petition that they put together.
Not the CAC.
Not members of the CAC. Members of the
But
CAC.
not as the CAC.
Not as the CAC. So there was
in
just,
their individual capacities, they put together a petition.
Correct.
And they're looking
Sorry
to
if I was
send it,
unclear.
and
Yes.
it's not going to be on Amagansett CAC letterhead.
Correct.
Perfect,
Yes,
'cause
that will be.
We did that once with Wainscott CAC. We had to clarify that.
This is
10 years ago.
individual members within the CAC. So they just were looking just very specifically within that petition. They're looking to get an update on the engineering plan, which they were told would be here by the end of summer, and what actions have been taken around inclusion, if any, to include the project in upcoming capital budgets at the state level. We gave them an update on the Amagansett lighting project. We discussed the separation of the municipal parking lot project from the Main Street project itself. And then one thing we were able to do with the help of the police department was give an update on historical traffic accident reports for the Main Street area, including the report for the area around Old Stone Highway and Abraham's Path, which we discussed with board members previously as it kind of continues to be an area of concern. There are obviously no historical traffic reports for the bridge area itself. The nearest location, we did previously have a trailer once set up by the fish farm on Cranberry Hall Road, so a significant distance from the bridge with plenty of feeder roads into Cranberry Hall Road. So, the data for that area needs to be taken with some caution. But there was a measurement done between June and August 2022 for 14 days. They recorded 3,165 vehicles a day, eastbound, westbound in that location. So what does that kind of compare to? Well, while we're looking at the rest of the traffic studies for the Main Street area, they had an intermittent speed trailer located outside the school measuring westbound traffic between July 2021 and August 2024. That averaged 2,380 cars a day. So there's more cars on Cranberry Hall east-west.
No. What happened was Cranberry Hall was measured during the summer season.
Sure.
And the trailers were in front of or by the school, different times between a 12-month period.
Correct.
So you're there.
It's a 14-day analysis versus
the chief went back to the lieutenant and.
Which is what I said. Yeah, it has to be viewed with some caution. But just interesting to note that when you think of the traffic on Cranberry Hall Road itself, it's not an insignificant number. Actually, this kind of led in discussion not related about the bridge, but about the condition of Cranberry Hall Road itself. Numerous community members within the CAC reported that they're concerned about the maintenance of that road, and just wanted to understand how I could work with Councillor Lease and Supervisor of Highways to address this and other roads that they feel need repair in the hamlet. So some discussion about what that process will be. Then finally, members inquired as to any plans have been submitted to the board regarding a change of ownership of one of the town's critical lifelines. The gas station has recently changed ownership of that shop, and they were reaching out to understand if anything had been submitted to the building or planning department to understand what plans might be taking place for that area. IT, we have a meeting with the
gas station.
I didn't want to name it in a public meeting just because it's a public thing. But yeah, I can talk to you about it offline. IT, we have a meeting with planning this Thursday to discuss the OpenGov progress. And then additionally, I will be looking to attend. There's a conference on the 24th showing OpenGov in action, which I will be looking to attend just to give myself some more insight into it. Human Services. Jason, if we could bring up those photos, that would be fantastic. We celebrated last Friday 50 years of the town nutrition program at the American Legion Center Hall last Friday. We had 155 seniors in attendance. It was a wonderful success. Huge thanks to all the Human Services Department for putting this together. Michelle, especially, you did a wonderful, wonderful job. It was, as you can see from this last photo, very moving and just really brought together some of the most wonderful members in our community.
And did you say that's the American Legion, right?
That's correct, yes. Just additionally, they want me to let you know that Ashwell Hall classes begin again tomorrow, 12 p.m. There will be balance and self-defense. 1 p.m. there'll be Qigong, 3, and at 2 p.m. osteoporosis prevention and stretching. Also, chair yoga with Michelle at the Montauk Community Center Nutrition Program is moving from Monday to Friday at 11 a.m. in the wellness room. Sanitation, I haven't had a lot of response to the volunteers to clean up. I do have a meeting with the sanitation director tomorrow to discuss next steps to address that issue, and we've discussed that individually as board members as well. ADU implementation group, we have a meeting this Thursday at 11 a.m. Agenda items, we're going to have a look at a timeline for what we could deliver a town board work session with recommendations for changes to the existing code, discussion of the present presentation structure, presenters, etc. And then we're getting updates from the committee on perspectives on primary ownership. And we're looking to get from Town Attorney Jill Nickey an update on the timing of the tax guidance from lawyers. Additionally, want to discuss with them what we think the timeline is for the relaunch of the town ADU website and any supporting media such as pamphlets. East End Fire Commissioners, we have a meeting on September 24th, 7 p.m. at Spriggs Fire Department. The Disability Advisory Boards, we're meeting Friday the 20th. We submitted to board members last week proposed universal access design posters that we would look to add to the town building webpage as a link, along with anyone applying for a building permit. Any thoughts or feedback from board members, if possibly could get by Wednesday next week, I'd like to get that posted to the town building and ADA web pages. East Hampton Youth Task Force, some wonderful news here. Just to let the community know that iTry was awarded the President's Council on Fitness, Sport and Nutrition Community Leadership Award. Congratulations to all the team and all the athletes there. Anti-Bias Task Force will be meeting tomorrow at 4 p.m. Arts Council Committee will be meeting next Monday at 5 p.m. via Zoom. And finally, tick control. Last call for any committee members. We have reaching out to the DC, Town Nature Preserve Committee, and the Sportsman's Alliance for members from those organizations as well. But we'll be looking to have that on the agenda for next Thursday.
Great. Thank you, Tom. David?
I want to wish my wife a happy 19th anniversary and for 19 years a joy to myself.
Happy anniversary.
Good stuff.
That's all I have.
That's all you have. Well, what's more important
Nothing.
than good husband? Kate? Yes, I have gotten some visuals on the dune construction at Ditch, which I'll reach out immediately to the community and the neighborhood in Ditch to present to them. We are, and that's for the coastal dune restoration project at Ditch Plains. For the $600,000 grant, we are working through the 26 tasks that we had on the initial contracts that we received from the state. We do have some small tweaks and changes to that. I'm still working on that with Sam Klein. Next, as part of the named organizations, partner organizations, the Montauk Chamber of Commerce and the Nature Conservancy are named in the grant. And we'd like to include CCOM, obviously, as outreach partners. I'll be reaching out, meeting with the Chamber and Nature Conservancy, hopefully this week. The Litter Action Committee, again, I'm just going to reiterate participation in the national cleanup of East Hampton on September 21st. Please reach out to me, to my office at 631-324-2620 for any information. If you have an organization, a group, a neighborhood, a couple of people that would like to join in on that, please reach out. It's September 21st of this year. The Wainscott Citizen Advisory Committee met. We had a lovely meeting last Saturday. It was a beautiful morning in Wainscott. Topics that were of concern were, of course, the speeding. I presented to them, since it was already out on the town website, I brought copies of the presentation on the procedures for the 25-mile-an-hour law. They were in great support of the town in acting a set of procedures and also enacting 25 miles an hour on some streets. They are interested in looking at, when we were talking about the zoning code amendments, they mentioned a proposal that I think we had a work session on. I think it was I'm not sure if it was David or Sylvia who presented on a tree protection law. So right now we have clearing laws, but we don't have codes that protect certain diameters of trees, which are irreplaceable with revegetation projects. Speed bumps have come up again, as they have in the past. They look at Sagaponic. Several of the committee members have made calls out to Sagaponic, and it seems like they're happy with the speed bumps. They understand that the authority goes to our superintendent of highways, but I just wanted to bring that up. I've also articulated what I believe are his concerns to the committee as well, but I think at some point they're going to invite the superintendent of highways to a meeting for further discussion. And they're also concerned with the future, as always, of the gun club, very concerned with safety there and the future of the gun club, and also the activities on the Wayne-Scott Commercial Center. And I think that's all I have. Ian?
Yeah, I just want to focus on one very exciting thing, which is a New York Forward Strong grant opportunity, which is a $4.5 million grant that we are going to apply to for Springs. The way this came about, my last liaison report last Tuesday, I was speaking about the Springs CAC concerns about road safety. Samantha Klein, our intergovernmental relations officer, if I've got that title right, was watching and said, oh, there might be a grant that we have to sort of get in the works by last Friday, so just a few day turnaround. And we worked together last week to submit a preliminary plan. This grant is for pro-housing communities, of which we're one of the first ones on Long Island. So having done that work, Kathy and Rebecca and everybody, it puts us in a very good position. 2 of these grants will be awarded, and I think there's only approximately 11 people. So we're not a shoo-in by any means, but we put ourselves in a very good position for a significant grant. The goal would be to improve, as I said, or I believe I said, business areas. And I thought this sort of dovetailed in very, very well with the Springs Hamlet study that identified 2 areas on the end of Fort Pond, which is also a road with pedestrian issues, which is very near our historic, heart of Springs area where the library, Ashwag Hall are. We've already done work. We have plans for a culvert replacement in that area, which would help us to show our commitment to sort of revitalization. There's been some septic work in the area. And so long story short, I'm very excited about sort of looking at what we can do to tie our historic area of Springs in with the business centers and keeping it our nice rural feel, but also, there's a lot of people who live off that Fort Pond area, and, the school is not far away. There's probably kids walking to school. It's not incredibly safe, and I think there's a lot of potential here. I don't want to talk too much about it. Well, I already have, but there'll be a lot more to come. The due date, we had to submit a geographical area to say this is why we're interested. We did that. Now, the formal application is due October 18th, so over the coming weeks, I will work with Springs CAC. Anybody else out there, I encourage you to reach out to me or to Samantha Klein about what you might like to see. By the end of the year, we would know if we were awarded that grant, in which case we really start to get into more details about specific projects and such. But in addition to being available to the town, it's a no-match grant for the town, by the way. So it's, $4.5 million that we can spend to improve this if we're awarded. There is a component that allows businesses to participate as well, and they would have to have a matching component. But businesses in the area that we're talking about that might be involved, again, the whole thing to me is very, very exciting. And at the risk of going on too long, I just want to say that, that process makes me really appreciate the privilege to be here and to serve. The fact that, I think the work that Kathy Burke-Gonzalez did to really, and Eric Shantz and others, to become a pro-housing community, to then have an intergovernmental relations officer who's new, watch an off, comment and potentially open up the, a large grant. Again, I don't want to get my hopes too much up or anybody else's, but I think it's really good that we got to this point so quickly, and it's kudos to the way that you're running your administration, Kathy.
Thank you, Ian. Okay, I have just 2 items. One is East Hampton Town Police Department statistics for this past weekend. It goes from Friday morning at 6 a.m. to Monday morning at the same time. 159 events, including 25 aided cases, 5 motor vehicle accidents, 1 commercial noise, and 2 residential noise complaints with no violations, 4 arrests, including 2 DWIs, and 54 citations applications issued. There was a big event in the downtown area of Montauk, the Montauk Seafood Festival on Saturday and Sunday. It was very well attended, and it was uneventful, which we like, which was great. Last night, the East Hampton CAC met, and we had a presentation and robust dialogue with Kirby Marcantonio. He brought and introduced his workforce housing concept. We also talked a little bit about some road work that needed to be done. There's a deep pothole in the southwest corner of Route 114 and Stevenhans Path, and that is, the state needs to repair that. Kevin Cobb had been making calls to the DOT, and we weren't really getting any traction. We reached out to Fred Thiel, and it's getting on the schedule. So that was helpful. We also talked a little bit about, again, e-bikes, e-scooters, and folks' concern with them riding on the sidewalk over on North Main Street where it's been prohibited. We talked about how we need really to get the word out. We've done a lot of work with social media. We had that presentation in May where we talked all things public safety, but we need to do more. And that's what I have as far as my liaison reports. And now we have a couple of resolutions. And David, if you could start us off.
I'm happy to offer Resolution 2024-1160. This is the Gonaris accept donation of real property and a budget modification. Again, this is where town is considering 9.5 acres, 6 parcels of the following tax map numbers, whereas pursuant to the donation agreement, supervisor is authorized to direct and execute any documents to the town budget officer. And direct to pay any and all reasonable title prorated tax and recording charges may be needed. We're going to actually resolve to effectuate this acquisition. We are the budget office directed to make the following modifications to 2024 Land Management Division budget. We're decreasing by $3,500 from tree maintenance, and we're increasing by $3,500 land acquisition. The financial impact is up by $3,500 to the appropriate budget line.
Second. All in favor?
I would like to move for discussion, if I may. Sure. Sorry. Thank you. Sorry, I did receive some correspondence on this from a resident just with concerns about ownership parcel. We did reach out to the Land Management Department, and just as the response that he was comfortable with me sharing with regards to the questions that were raised. But it is a reserve area, and we're only receiving a partial interest in the underlying fee of this land. It is possible there could be claims later that Mr. Gunaris, but it's unlikely that Mr. Gunaris will try and take a charitable donation. It's not of a concern, given that the reserve area is privately held by a group who subdivided it. It's currently considered to be somewhat of a no man's land that is not managed or maintained with a Panama path traversing the property. The neighbors nor the town have any recourse or power over this land without some underlying fee ownership. It's a donation similar to a memorial tree or a bench, and we always thank donors. So that was the feedback as to why I will be supporting this as well.
All in favor?
Aye. 1161 is a budget modification for the joint fuel facility. We're increasing the budget line for insurance. $25,500 to budget line, we're modifying and bringing from budget line for insurance of $25,500 to budget line for equipment repair and maintenance in the same amount.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
I have Resolution 1162. This is to accept a grant of scenic and conservation easement, whereas a public hearing was held on September 5th, 2024, and resolved that the town hereby accepts the easement listed below. The grantor is Paul Bronzo. It's a scenic and conservation easement dated June 14th, 2024 at 65 Jacqueline Drive, Amagansett, Suffolk County Tax Map number 300-176-01-19. The reviewing agency is the Zoning Board of Appeals.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Resolution 1163 is a grant of a scenic and conservation easement, and this was a public hearing was also held on September 5th. And the town resolved that the town board accepts the easement listed below. The grantor is Andrew Mitzer. The type of easement, scenic and conservation. The date is July 25th, 2024. It's at 67 Leeton Road, Amagansett. Tax rep number 300-131-3-16.1. And the reviewing agency is again the Zoning Board of Appeals.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Resolution 1164 is a budget modification in the building department, and this is moving the amount of $3,040 from computer software to the same amount to office expense.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye. Resolution 2024-1165, this is to authorize appraisals by Elise Prado for affordable housing purposes. 2 properties at $400 each and the total amount of $800.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Resolution 2024-1166 is to amend Resolution 2024-1026 for asbestos professional. That resolution contained a typo on the projected costs. This is for Silver Wolf Environmental, Inc., and they'll be hired to perform any necessary asbestos testing and monitoring at a fee not to exceed $12,835.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
1167 is a payout for a change of position for Paul Gonzalez. Paul Gonzalez has changed his position from traffic control specialist to police officer with the East Hampton Town Police Department. Audited time records indicate he has accrued vacation time and accrued compensatory time. And so his payout will be a gross total of $4,325.15.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
1168 is a budget modification for the finance department. We're increasing the revenue budget line interest on investments in the amount of $35,000, and we're increasing the expenditure budget line of outside professional in the same amount.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
1169 is a budget modification for the highway department. This is where we're moving $100,000 from health insurance and $200,000 from full-time salaries to road surface materials in the amount of $300 and increasing the revenue budget line for unreserved surplus in the amount of $270,000 and increasing the expenditure line for road surfacing materials in the amount of $270,000. Again, this is for our fall paving budgets.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Resolution 1170 is a budget modification for insurance, and this is so that we can cover our year-end costs for insurance. There's a dozen lines here that are affected. We're basically moving $196,150 from different health insurance lines to other health insurance lines in other funds. And then we're increasing the revenue interest on investments in the amount of $68,500 and increasing the expenditure for insurance in the amount of $68,500.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Do I have a motion to go into exec session?
Yes, I'd like to make a motion to go into executive session for CPF, leases, personnel, and litigation.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Well, thank you, everyone, for joining us today. Britt?